to get to a certain stage, okay, I'm
is about. Welcome to everybody, and welcome to anybody watching outside from externally. This is the Welsh Ambulance University NHS Trust Open Board. Finally, title right. Yeah. We're practicing. So warm welcome to everybody in the room. Warm welcome to anybody who is watching live, and also a warm welcome to anybody who's watching this as a recorded session. We have a few apologies just to mention. We have apologies from non-exec directors Bethan, Jogger and Hannah, and Estelle, you're here for this meeting, but giving apologies for the two meetings that we're following on later in the day. We are, however, quorate, so that is good. Can we have any declarations of interest? If there are any? No declaration of interest, that's fine. And may I just say, for the benefit of anybody watching, as I always do on these occasions, that this is the meeting of the Trust Board, which is part of the governance process. It is not the entirety of the governance process. Most of the governance work is actually undertaken through our various committees. We will hear about the work of the committees during the meeting, but it's not the purpose of this meeting to repeat the work that has been done already. And the work that has been done already is well documented in the minutes and the AAA reports that accompany each of those committees. Okay, which takes us to the minutes of the previous meeting. Just checking if everybody is content to approve those. Accurate record. No comments or questions on them. Around the table, no. Okay, we take that as being approved. We then move to the action log. There are 3 items on the action log. They have all been closed. One related to errors in the Welsh language translation, one related to census data, and one related to some questions about lost hours, which has been referred to our Quest committee. Everybody content with those? Any questions with those? They are all closed. Good, thank you very much. That's grand. In that case, moving swiftly on, item 5 was the chair's report. I've got nothing specific to say, but I will just make a couple of comments. We are recruiting at the moment for non-exec director roles, and that recruitment is ongoing with the process moving along quite nicely. The other thing I'll just mention for interest's sake is that I spent the evening yesterday in the 111 centre, which was particularly interesting because, as we all know, there's been a new IT system installed, and I was quite keen to go and see for myself how that has been received, so that I could give a verbal report on that. And I have to say that the response was incredibly positive. I spent a considerable amount of time with a call handler who is a gentleman not far off retirement age, who has been with the 111 centre for approaching 4 years, so well experienced in the previous system. And the obvious questions, how did he find the transfer? The answer was it was very painless, very straightforward. Training was excellent. He had no difficulty making the transfer from the old system to the new. He loved the new system. He thought it was a very significant improvement. There were a few little, not niggles, but the wrong word, but a few things which could be upgraded. I mean, he had to put the person's Christian name in a couple of times, instead of just once on a couple of different screens. There was a time when he had to cut and paste a phone number. They were very minor. The real issue around the questions and the kind of whole hierarchy of the triaging process, he thought was excellent. So I mean, I thought really good news. And then I also spent a considerable amount of time last night with one of the nurses on the CSD, and she was commenting, as indeed was the supervisor on the night, that the number of calls in the queue had considerably gone down, partly as a result of the new system, that people were not being referred to CSD callback because call handlers were able to end calls and use different pathways. And it was significant that on yesterday evening, about 8 o'clock yesterday evening, there was something like 14 calls waiting for the nurse to pick and to respond to. And they were saying that there were times when there could have been over 100. So, I mean, I think that it was admittedly just one visit. It was about 4 hours between sort of 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock or whatever last night. But I mean, all the feedback was extremely positive, and it was great news. So that's all for me, I think. So we move to number 6, which is for you, Jason.
Great, thanks, Colin. So as usual, I'll pull out just a couple of points, a half dozen or so points through the paper, and then happy to take any questions on it. Clearly, it provides a comprehensive update of all the activities across the organisation since we last met. If we go to the bottom of page 2 first, at the last dot point there, that just covers the fact that we concluded the spring round of roadshows, 7 events all up, commencing or in the week of the 15th of April. starting in North Wales and kind of zigzagging our way across the country back down to South Wales and Cwmbran, where the last event took place. Over 500 staff, probably closer to 600, I think, on this occasion, counting all the heads that were there. Some of the events ended up being oversubscribed, nearly double the number of people who were expecting in one of the events that had booked in, and some really good conversation, opportunity to listen and hear from our people across the organisation, but also share some of our plans. And what was particularly pleasing, I think, on this occasion, for me certainly, was that there were far more operational frontline colleagues in the room than we've seen in previous roadshows. It's always difficult for frontline EMS colleagues and those in contact centres to be able to get to them because of shifts and so on. But there were probably a couple of tables of colleagues from each of those staff groups in the room this time round. And thank you to colleagues in the room that supported those events too. If we then go over the page to 3, paragraph 4, this just touches on the work that's been going on to assess in detail the couple of hundred recommendations which came out of the Manchester Arena inquiry. We will be bringing through our governance processes in due course our assessment of those recommendations and what we need to do to satisfy those which are relevant to us. There will be a business case because there will be some cost associated with that. We're going to break the assessment down into 3 reports, three papers essentially, one on capability to prepare, one on capability to respond, and the capability of specialist assets. So 3 different areas we'll look at in that work. That will come through in the next couple of months. Both commissioners in the old ESC and the new JCC guys are aware of that work, as is the relevant team in government. And once we've brought through for assessment in our internal governance processes, our assessment of those recommendations, we'll be sharing that with commissioners in government too. Over the page on 4, if we can then go to paragraph 13, I think it's just worth reflecting on this here, that we know that colleagues in CCCs, in our clinical contact centres, the management structure is very light in the clinical contact centres, and we've had a couple of goes over the last 2 years maybe to look at how we can both respond to recommendations which were made as part of the original demand and capacity review, but also strengthen the management support in the contact centres for staff, and also provide additional progression opportunities for those colleagues in there. It's particularly pleasing now we've been able to invest in that structure, and the team in Lee's Directorate have developed, in partnership with those staff and trade union colleagues, a new structure, a revised structure, which will essentially hit all 3 of those areas, offer greater opportunity for development, strengthen management and leadership support, and help us with efficiency and delivery too. So that's particularly pleasing to see. Over the page on 5, just a shout out, if I can, Chair, to the finance team, Chris and the finance team, again landing both the revenue budget in paragraph 15, but also the capital budget in paragraph 19 on target. Where are you, Chris? Down there. On target or slightly within target. 10 quid and sixpence, of course, that's important. The sixpence is important on the 22 million on the capital expenditure limit. So well done to you, and thank you to the team who are still going through it now, of course, because we're in the audit process for that at the moment. But it's good to see that again, and continuing our run of financial balance. Over the page on 25, this is about Monmouth. So some colleagues will be across the fact that some of our estate is in a quite poor condition, and of course we have to prioritise the capital monies, as colleagues will be aware, that are available to us to make those improvements. There is, or has been, still continues to be, quite a significant estates backlog, and we've been working over the last couple of years to kind of pick off, if you like, the schemes that we can afford to do within the available capital that we've got, but on a priority basis, essentially with the worst or the most significantly challenged kind of coming first. Monmouth has been on the list and has now got to the top of the list, if you like, and we're in the final stages of working through what scheme we will deploy in Monmouth to replace what were supposed to be temporary porter cabins for 6 months about 10 years ago. So the condition of the estate there is certainly not great. And whilst you can see a long list of other estates activities which are underway, it's good to see Monmouth now at the point where we will this year begin something, yet to be determined what, but something will begin later this year. To improve facilities for staff at Monmouth, which is great. And then if we move forward to paragraph 43 on page 10, it was good to see we hosted the ambulance queue network first event meeting in Cardiff in March. It's a couple of months ago now, but we're reporting it here now. So this brought colleagues from essentially the Quality Improvement Network across the UK, across the 10 services in England and the 3 devolves together for their first face-to-face event in Cardiff. A load of external speakers, a load of good dialogue and sharing of best practice and approaches that colleagues are taking across the country. And clearly we were particularly pleased to host that first event here in Wales. So thanks to the team, Liam, or the people in your team, Liam, quality improvement team, who put work in to arrange that and bring it all together. Next, if I can, at the bottom of page 10, paragraph 45, this is just to draw the board's attention to the fact that there are a series of workshops attended by over 70 colleagues, including trade union partners, earlier this month to look at the look in detail or begin to develop the detail of the kind of next iteration of the clinical model we are currently operating. So we will bring forward in a phased way later this year, or commence in a phased way later this year, changes to the way we currently manage activity. It's essentially an evolution, next stage, if you like, or next phase of the current clinical model that we're operating. And of course, many colleagues on the board will remember that Wales, before many of us were here, was the first organisation, first ambulance service in the UK to move away from time being the total measure of success and introducing quality indicators. Whilst time continues to be important for many patients and is a measure of patient satisfaction, also clearly the quality of what we do, the care that we provide once we arrive on scene, is also increasingly important. So we were the first to do that in the UK quite a few years ago now. We'll be bringing forward kind of the next phase of that, if you like, later this year, which will see some changes made to how we manage activity and introduce a clinical intervention and assessment much earlier in the patient's journey. If we can then go to 55 on page 12. In the next, probably at the next meeting, Chair, we will bring through a closure report for what's known as the EMS Operational Transformation Programme Board. A big long title, but essentially this is the team, this is the group of people that have been quietly in the background delivering all of the actions which emerged from the first strategic demand and capacity review in 2018-19. So that was, the recruitment, training, onboarding, deployment of over 300 staff, the development of and introduction of over 140 new rosters nationally, changes to the estate, changes to our fleet mix, changes to our operating model, lots and lots of activity quietly delivered in the background. Efficiencies delivered through that too, not only with the roster change and the 72 hold times that that offered, but also significant increases in the rate of hear and treat, or what we now call consult close, and other efficiencies too that were identified in that work. We'll be bringing through that project closure report here, given the scale of it. And of course, we're just about to embark on the second strategic demand and capacity review, which is concluded, and we'll see the results of that come through in due course as well. So that's I'm really pleased with that. Whilst it wasn't without some pain and turbulence, everyone, including trade union colleagues, I have to say, gents at the end of the table, have been very supportive of that work and helped us deliver it, which has been really helpful. And then finally, Colin, if I can, just paragraph 77 on page 17, which is about respiratory protection equipment. Here we've been, there's been a task and finish group looking at the approach we need to take, and here a decision or an outcome from that has been reached, and the work to ensure that we've got the right respiratory protection equipment in the front line available to all our people continues to be underway. So I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much, Jason. So questions and Kelly.
Just one, Jason, if I can. The commissioning system process transition.
Yeah.
How is that going? How? What are the challenges?
Well, there's been 2 meetings of the new JCC so far. I attended the first one. I couldn't get to the second one, so Rachel went on my behalf. I think it's fair to say it's going okay from our perspective. Stephen has been retained or is retained in the Chief Ambulance Service Commissioner role. And of course, he's also adopted responsibility for 111. That is fair to say in transition or flex, if you like. The last 111 implementation program board has now taken place, so that's essentially closed. And what was agreed is that through Q1, there would be a gradual transition from the old arrangements to the new arrangements in terms of the commissioning, performance management of 111. So that's well underway. And we've certainly been engaging with Stephen and his team on that. We've also had good dialogue with Stephen and his team about the point I just made about changes later this year to the clinical response model, and on a range of other issues. So I think it's fair to say it's going okay. Clearly, we have, just by the very nature of what the new arrangements are, one meeting once a month for 3 or 4 hours, instead of a bespoke meeting once a month for 3 or 4 hours for us. So we do have less airtime, but there is good dialogue or relationships behind the scenes. And Colin, you and I are seeing the new chair of the joint commissioning arrangements in the next fortnight. I think it is fortnight or 3 weeks. So early days, but it feels okay.
Okay. Any other good? Kelly, and then got to Peter.
Just one quick question, Jason, and as always, a really informative and helpful, I think, overview. It was just in the first section, you talk about the North Wales cross-sector chief executive meeting. I just wondered if, are there any outcomes that are coming from the meetings? Obviously, in North Wales, we do have some challenges, as we do across Wales, but any outcomes or any optimism on that delivering some outcomes in the future?
Specifically for us, I think it's probably fair to say no, because the agenda for that group particularly is focused on strategic issues across North Wales, not in health. So this isn't a health group. This is emergency services, local authority, health, other kind of public sector players. So whilst there is some health content, it's not a forum really where we could get into detailed operational health stuff, if that makes sense. I mean, the big topic, in the last couple of meetings for that group has been transport across North Wales and strategically what direction is to be taken with improvements in transport network, both rail, road, buses, and so on.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jason. Really, really helpful. I got 2 questions. First, paragraph 3, to do with your meetings, and that's one heck of a lot of meetings that you attend. But I was specifically interested in terms of the blue light service leaders. you know, whether a general point, is that a sort of a general, how is it going type meeting, or does it focus on specific upcoming events? But my specific queries with the right care, right person agenda, in particular, we know there's going to be resource implications transferring from police onto us.
Yeah.
So is that the forum that issue gets discussed, or is it more of a planning meeting, or what is it?
So the blue light service meeting referred to here is JESC, so the Joint Emergency Services Group. So that's the heads of the chief constables of 4 police forces, 3 chief fire officers of 3 fire services, us, military from 3 divisions in military, and also health. It's a non-statutory entity, which doesn't have a formal place in either the governance or command and control arrangements across Wales. But what it does do is offer an opportunity for sharing of strategic issues across agencies. Clearly, it also helps us with relationships, you know, building and maintaining relationships. And we know certainly that in the heat of battle, I can describe it like that, you know, those relationships are relying on the knowledge and the ability to pick up the phone to someone is crucial. It's a monthly session and face-to-face now quarterly, which offers an opportunity for sharing essentially, you know, operational issues across the agencies and kind of strategic planning. It's a good forum. It's an hour when they're on the 2 months that they're, you know, remote, and then a couple of hours face to face every quarter. So I think it's a good investment of time, and it's unique in the UK. There's no other place in the UK where you can get all of the strategic leads for essentially emergency services and other kind of key response agencies in the room. Just can't do it. So it's a good forum. On the right care, right person, we have discussed it in that forum, but more at a strategic level, and perhaps me trying to nudge police colleagues to unblock some challenges we've had around getting data out, but there's a specific operational forum which John Edwards in Lee's team is the kind of lead for from our perspective, in planning for right care, right person. As you say, we do expect to see increases in activity come our way. We're not quite clear on the volume of that yet, but Lee might want to say more about where John's got to with it.
Yeah. So myself, so as Jason says, operationally, John, there's Mark as well from Liam's teams. We've got a good operational and clinical connection, but there is the names I will not be able to reel off without looking them up, but there is a governance arrangement, including Welsh Government and the key partners, in terms of understanding the consequence of right care, right person. It's progressing, albeit slower than I think any of us would have anticipated. Not necessarily a bad thing, but as Jason says, police are working hard to understand the data, the information. So some services are through with phase 1, which is around the welfare checks. Other police services are yet to follow on that, and the phase 2 aspects are already starting to push out. But we are both operationally, clinically as well, pushing very hard to understand consequence. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Thanks. I've just got a second question. Sorry. The section 57, the visit to Yorkshire Ambulance Service, which was really encouraging to read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but their model goes some way, you know, in terms of the model that the change in the clinical model that we're going to follow. But if I'm reading this correctly, Yorkshire have had some positive returns from what they've done. So I wonder, have they got any other data that kind of, you know, proves the effectiveness of, and is this adding strength to our proposed change in our clinical model?
Andy, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I think there were probably 2 things that the team learned from the visit principally. One was the structure that they have within their contact centre for how they are streaming calls. Great deal of learning from that. That's directly going to impact upon some of the workshop work that we've been doing in recent weeks. So, you know, some clear learning and examples we'd either want to replicate or indeed build upon. But the second one is the relationship as well with other parts of the health economy as well. What Yorkshire had managed to do is successfully defray activity directly into other parts of the health economy without necessarily an interim step of having to dispatch an ambulance response to then refer it on. That shows some real clear benefits, that measurable benefits to the number of patients they were managing to redistribute in probably to a more suitable clinical outcome than simply send an ambulance that didn't really contribute, but just then offload it onto somebody else. So those were the bits that the take-home messages they came back with that I think we'll be able to start to look to build upon. We're in the process of lining up another visit now to Scotland. I'm just waiting for confirmation on the date where we'll take the same group of individuals again to look at what they're doing up in Scotland in terms of those things as well. So a lot of work going on in that space that hopefully we can learn from others and build upon and kind of make even better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Any other? No other questions. I just make a couple of points, just general points to underline, if I may. Perhaps for the benefit of anybody watching externally, one of the difficulties of leading and being a visible leader in an organisation like this is that it is remote. You don't have hospital sites you can sort of walk around and be seen. So I just wanted to underline the importance of the roadshows. And I think just to say, on behalf of myself as chair and perhaps the non-execs, a big thank you to you, Jason, and to the execs for putting yourself out. It's a big commitment to go out and do those roadshows. You do it twice a year. They're well supported, and they're really important events. So I think it's really good that you do that, and I think it's well worthwhile. And I think also underlining the kind of visibility of leadership in this organisation. If anybody was watching the WAST Live broadcast, was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Feels like ages ago, but it was just yesterday. Again, very open and transparent leadership. You and your colleagues put yourself right on the line there to answer questions very openly and very transparently. And anybody who watched that, and there's obviously a recording if anybody wants to go back and look at it of interest, the level of questions, the depth of questions, I think just again goes to underline the kind of culture of the organisation where people feel able to ask questions, and you as a leadership team feel able to put yourself there on the line to answer them. So well done. I think it's a very good thing to do. I'd underline the finance thing as well, that we'll hear more about finance in a separate paper, but well done. And the other comment I'd make as well is that obviously, again, for the benefit of you watching externally, that a lot of the operational performance issues we're going to come to later anyway, but we'll see those in much more detail. So good. Thank you very much, Jason. I think that's, nobody else wants to come back on that, so that's grand. So let's move on. Item number 7 is questions from the public, and we have a question, Estelle, which you're going to tell us about.
We do, Chair. Thanks very much, and welcome to everybody who's watching. We do have one question from a member of the public on this board meeting, and it's actually come from Angela Contestabile at the Stroke Association. So, Angela, if you're watching, good morning, or if you're watching on the playback. And Angela has helpfully been through the board papers, which is great because that's why they're on the website for members of the public to go through and to be able to pose their questions if they have any on them. And Angela's raising a question about some data she's found in the board papers about patients who either cancel their ambulance or patients where we've been unable to send an ambulance when we're at the height of our escalation, so we're extremely busy. In April 2024, we had almost 8,000 patients who cancelled their ambulance and another 170 callers where we were unable to send an ambulance because of the level of escalation that we were at. And Angela's question is, how many ambulances were cancelled from callers where there was a suspected stroke? And how many of the 170 that were unable to receive an ambulance were patients with a suspected stroke, if any? And Andy, I think I'm going to put that one across to you, if I may.
Yeah, by all means, and myself and Angela met only earlier this week as well. So thanks for the question, Angela. The detail within that question is quite technical. The immediate challenge will be, because we haven't attended scene, in terms of getting a confirmed diagnosis whether they are stroke patients, all we've got from it is the caller's details. So I think if I'm able to take that away and come back to Angela with a response, we'll review the information we do have and then come back to her with the information she requested.
Yeah, I think that would be fine, Angela. I hope that's okay with you, and I'm sure Andy will be in touch, as I say, if you're watching. And Chair, that was it. That was our one question.
Okay, thank you very much. And a reminder to anybody who's watching, we're always happy to receive questions. There's plenty of ways in which they can be sent to us. Please use those, and please do put your questions to us. Okay, item number 8 is Star Story, and I think probably Stella, you introducing us?
I'm not sure.
Okay, who is introducing? Ah, Angie, right, Angie, over to you.
Emma.
She's on the call. I just need to promote her to a panelist, so she'll appear on screen in 2 minutes.
Okay, while we're waiting for Emma, I'll just do the background in the context. So hopefully many of you will be aware, we obviously launched our People and Culture Plan last April. And as part of the delivery of that and the successful implementation across the organisation, we decided we wanted to create a community of culture champions. A year on, I'm delighted to say that we now have 107 culture champions. Welcome, Emma. Lovely to see you. I'm just doing the introduction. Yes, so we have 107 culture champions, and Emma is an emergency medical dispatcher, and she has been one of our early adopters of the culture champion role. Just to give you a bit of context of the role itself, the remit is to promote our behaviours, is to bring our people and culture plan to life, and to act as an additional conduit for colleagues in different parts of the organisation. They have their managers, they have the trade union, but this is also a peer who they can talk to, who will tell them about some of the work we've been doing on culture change. So I'll stop there and I'll hand over to you, Emma. And I hope what you will do, because I know we've talked about this, is share your own experience, but your story about being a culture champion. So over to you.
Thank you. So a little bit about me. My background, I worked in a secondary school for 17 years as a health and wellbeing coordinator for autistic sixth form boys. So it's predominantly around anger management and anxiety. During COVID, I needed a new change, so I started with the Welsh Ambulance Service as a call taker, and during my 4 years, I've become a trained supervisor, call taker supervisor to help. I'm also a trained mentor and the culture champion. I wanted to become a culture champion because I wanted to understand what they were, what they meant, and how they can help. I heard so many people talking about them, and the management saying that they've introduced the new behaviours and how they're going to be helping with the well-being of staff. And I just wanted to learn a little bit more about it. Once I knew the background of the behaviours, I wanted to disseminate that information because there's a lot of pressures with the call takers, and I wanted my colleagues to understand how they'd be able to have effective communication by knowing what the behaviours are and what they mean. I do think it is an invaluable framework, and I do think that is going to help with the overall well-being of staff. There is a lot of burnout, there is a lot of stress within the call-taking environment, and by knowing the behaviours, it allowed me to have the confidence to speak up about the issues that we were experiencing. So the Culture Champions has helped me a lot. Just by networking, I have got to know more people. I'm enjoying what I do, and I like to help other people as well. I wanted to let other people know about the benefits. Next slide, if possible, please. Thank you. So with the help of Laura in the within the Culture Champions, I have created display boards. So in Central West, we have 2 rooms. We have an upstairs room for the call takers and the clinicians, and at the moment downstairs is the dispatchers and allocators. So I wanted to make the behaviours and the culture champions and disseminate this information. I wanted to make it inclusive of everybody in CCC in Carmarthen. So I've done 2 display boards just to reflect that. I've also made conversation starters with the help of Laura. Obviously, the allocators and the dispatchers, they do have, it is different to the call-taking environment. So I just thought if we could get the DCMs to do a conversation starter rather than have a one-to-one with the allocator or dispatch. I've also created shout-outs. I'm not going to lie, being a call taker is a thankless job. we don't get any thanks. We see quite often on Siren the Thank You Thursdays, where members of the public have thanked crews, they've thanked NEPs, but it's very rare call takers get any thanks at all. And that can be quite demoralising. So I thought by introducing shout outs, having your colleagues notice how well you're doing, have supervisors notice the good work you're doing, and just getting it up on the display board, sending it over to Laura for her to put over to Siren, that has helped boost morale in the call taking environment. I also have made the Would You Rather and the Thoughts posters just to be put around the call taking environment. This does help with including everybody on shift. You may get a group of friends on shift at the same time, and they may subconsciously be leaving one other call taker out. So by including the Would You Rather and the Thoughts, the supervisor on shift can include everybody to make sure that we have some form of inclusion within the in between taking calls. I help the supervisors on shift. They come to me and ask me if I have any ideas of how we can improve behaviours within the environment. I have suggested that we can incorporate the behaviours on our monthly one-to-ones where we have our KPIs. If supervisors notice any patterns of behaviour reoccurring, the supervisors can bring it up there in private with that call taker. I have also created various resources which I have sent to North Wales, I've sent to South and East. I've also travelled to the 2 different sites just to try and recruit more culture champions, as I can see the benefit already. The impact, next slide if possible, please. So our feedback, like I said, I've asked the call takers for feedback. And this is the feedback that we have. So it's friendly competition. One EMD has said that seeing others have a shout out makes me want to work harder to get them too, because I'm getting the thanks. And it was a male member of staff, and he did that. He ended up having a shout out because he was so good, and he was asking the right questions about when he had to buddy the new intake of call takers. It's getting the call takers are now realizing that the behaviors are beneficial. They are talking about them a lot more. It's in the environment all of the time. The supervisors have said that they've noticed a difference in behaviors as well, which is really good. I'm really happy. With regards to what needs to happen next, I do think that we do need to look at burnout a lot more and how the behaviours can help with stress and burnout within the call taking environment. I have personally gone through 3 episodes of burnout where I haven't been able to come to work for over a month. And the longer it's taken me to recover, the more anxious I am about going back to work. And it's just that vicious cycle. And by learning more about the behaviours and the culture and how it does help, has helped me with my well-being in work. I now understand the triggers. I can now understand that I need to take a bit more time. If I have a traumatic call, I have the confidence now to speak up and say, I need 5 minutes. Whereas before I may not have done that. I didn't want to let the team down. I didn't want to go out because I was very aware that we have calls polling, but now I need to do it to be safe, psychological safety. I need to have it for my own well-being. I do think that this needs to be told across the call takers. They need to have that 5 minutes, otherwise it is going to build up and build up. Burnout is not nice whatsoever. And I think, especially now with the way things are at the moment, I'm not going to lie, there is a lot of staff burnout that is due to increase in abusive callers, where we, which is really, really unfortunate, we are now having to celebrate the nice callers that we have, because it is very rare that we have a nice caller who thanks us. Majority of our 12-hour shifts, we are getting abuse. We are getting told that we are the reason this patient is going to die. We are told by healthcare professionals that we are to blame. Call takers are to blame because we're not organising an ambulance, when in fact we're in such a high escalation, we're unable to provide that ambulance. And I think because of this, we have staff going off. Because staff are going off, we are short staffed. And that again is a vicious cycle where the level of calls, the high demand, short staffed and sickness, we do have such a high staff turnover. And I think we need to get our call takers just to understand a little bit more about the behaviours, so we can ensure our well-being is sound in work. So yeah, I would like to just disseminate this knowledge a little bit more, but it is quite hard at the moment to recruit culture champions, unfortunately. But I am on the case, and I know Angie is on the case as well. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much. Very illuminating, very informative. Let's just go to questions and comments. I've got a whole number, and I know that Jason, you've been scribbling furiously and waving your hand at me. So, shall we come to you first? I think you probably got in first.
Emma, thank you for joining us this morning and sharing your story. I don't think we've met before, so it's good to meet you virtually. Firstly, it's great to hear such a positive representation of, notwithstanding the challenges that you've described, which I'll come back to in a second. It's great to hear such a positive story, and I just want to say thank you to you personally for getting involved and leaning in, you know, and taking on some extra stuff to help your colleagues in your contact centre. It's also, I was really encouraged. I'm kind of, you know, smiling away here. You know, you've been with us just about 4 years, and it's good to see your progression and journey as well, a development, you know, in your role, but also, you know, starting to help and support others that you work with. That's just so powerful. The behaviours, of course, we designed, didn't we, a few years ago? Well, we didn't design them. Our people, you designed them, because it was a group of colleagues that came together and designed the new behaviours that they wanted to see, that we all wanted to see in our organisation, and how we treat and support and work with each other. So the fact that you're promoting these, you know, you're personally kind of taking them on board, promoting them, bringing them off the page, making them real in your workplace is really powerful, because, you know, they were designed by our people for our people. To improve the workplace experience for all of us, and it's important that we. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted, saying this to you, Emma, but it's important that we all live and bring those behaviours off of the page, off of the poster, off of the lanyard, you know, whatever it is, into how we work together, because it's all about making our workplace experience for all of our colleagues, all of our people, staff, and volunteers better. I love the display boards. They're great, really great. And it's powerful to see you put, you know, clearly you put some of your own time into designing those to help people. So they're great. I'll say one thing about while I've got the floor, Colin, if I can, about colleagues in contact centres. I've worked in the sector for 28 years. I've never worked full time in a contact centre. I've never been an EMD. I've never been a call handler, but I've spent a lot of time sitting next to and working with call handlers. And in a previous organisation, I was very close to, you know, what was going on in the control room, as it was called then. And my language sometimes slips back to control room, but you understand what I mean when I say clinical contact centre. I think it's the hardest job in the service. I think being a call handler in the nines and in the ones, to be fair, is the hardest job we have in our organisation for a whole range of reasons, including those which you've described in your session today. So a shout out from me to every single one of them, every single one of your colleagues in our 3 999 contact centres and all of our 111 centres. Thank you, because it is a really tough gig, and I appreciate that. I recognise that. The final thing I just want to say is about abusive callers, and you mentioned this. You know, this is clearly disappointing that we end up in this space. Particularly more so, I have to say, when I hear that healthcare professionals, small number of, it's not going to be every healthcare professional, but a small number of healthcare professionals, that is particularly disappointing, where we've got colleagues in our own system, you know, blaming you and your colleagues, individual call handlers, for delays. It's just not right. And of course, it's not the case. It's symptomatic, as we all understand and know, of the pressure that we've got right across urgent and emergency care, and none of us should be taking it out on any individual colleague, because we are all colleagues that we work with in the system. So that's particularly disappointing. Clearly, we're doing as much as we can, Emma, to support you and colleagues, particularly when we've got members of the public who are abusive. We do have to, of course, recognise that, you know, for many of those, it's the most stressful thing they've ever done, calling 999. You know, that they're in an uncontrolled, stressful environment. But where we've got repeat callers who are abusive, or people who are particularly abusive, we will go after them, you know, and where we can, we will seek prosecutions and interventions to manage those people, because it is just not right that you and other colleagues are abused for doing your job, you know, doing what you joined for. So I'll finish there, Colin, if I can, but just to circle back on the thanks to every single call handler, be they in the ones or the nines. It is a really tough gig. I hear the point Emma makes, that it's often thankless, but it is recognised and understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So looking at the table, so we go to Kerry, and then we'll come across to Lee, and we'll see where we go from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma, for your openness and transparency this morning. I think it's really important as a board that we hear it as it is. And also thanks for, you know, you go above and beyond in a job, and you've talked about the burnout. So I've recently taken on the chairing of the People and Culture Committee. And actually at the last meeting, we talked about the results of the NHS survey and the focus. We actually had an item on this, didn't we, Angie? So I suppose just to give you some assurance that at the People and Culture Committee, we are very focused on this, and we're coming back to it. I think the next survey is September later this year. So, and I think the levels were quite shocking at 23%, but I think that was across the NHS in its entirety. And we're, you know, we talked about how we can understand more of that. What other information can we get to help us put more solutions in place, I guess. So I had a question which Emma's, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but interested in any thoughts, but probably a question for Lee or Jason. You know, are we doing everything we can? I think when you talk about abusive callers, I assume that there's two contexts to that. There's the people that are really in a very stressful situation, who emotionally are in a difficult place and you know, respond in a way. I'm not saying it's okay to be abusive at all, but then there are, I guess, what we would label more abusive callers. So it feels, and maybe there's other contexts there. So there's a question with me, what more can we do around that? I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, Emma. Perhaps we could come, I know Lee's got his hand up anyway, to hear a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Shall we go to Emma, just to, if you wanted to kind of say a bit more about the abusive nature of calls, and whether they do differentiate themselves into people who are just kind of naturally abusive, or perhaps become abusive because you're unable to provide them with the support which they think they need.
I completely understand. It is a stressful situation. However, when the call takers are told, I've personally been threatened. I've been told that they are going to hunt me down and stab me in the neck. I have been told that they know where I work and they are going to camp outside and wait for me to come out. Other call takers have experienced the same. So that level of aggression and abusive caller is just not acceptable. However, when we're told to do a datix, that does take some time away from answering calls. So it's a little bit of a tough situation there. We obviously want to report it. However, when we are very conscious that there are eight calls polling on screen, one of those could be a cardiac arrest that we need to provide that help for as soon as possible. So the datix tends to go up to the back, really, whilst we focus on our work.
Does that mean, Emma, I mean, I think it almost necessarily means, therefore, that there is significant under-reporting?
Yes.
So the level of abuse, which we are very conscious of and feel strongly, it's an appalling situation. It's actually worse, maybe significantly worse than we're actually seeing from the official sort of reports of this. James, nodding on that.
No, I just wonder, Chair, if I could just come back. I just wonder what the opportunity then, if we've got some deeper insights around our messaging to the public. Of course, it's probably not going to stop it, but that evidence may be helpful in our approach.
You want to come back?
Yeah, just on that particular point. I mean, Estelle, you might want to comment here. I mean, we have led across the emergency services in Wales the Work With Us, Not Against Us campaign. So this was a campaign we've run for the last 2 years, maybe a bit longer, across the 3 services, which essentially it is about trying to educate the public towards the fact that if they abuse, assault, or interfere with the duties of our people, we can't help them, basically. Now, there has been, when we've analysed that, I haven't got the exact data to hand, but when we've analysed the impact of that, what we've seen is some reduction, I think, in physical assaults on our people. Of course, that doesn't apply in Emma's case and with Emma's colleagues. So some reduction in physical assaults, but largely, I guess the trend is consistent in the fact that we continue to see unnecessary, clearly unnecessary physical and also verbal, threatening, abusive behaviour towards our people, which is just not acceptable. So we have tried and we continue to try. We've had quite a big public-facing campaign, but we're always open to see what we can learn from others and more to do. I don't know if Estelle, you want to add anything?
Yes, thanks, Jason. I was just going to say there's a couple of things for me. One is, and Emma, I'm Estelle, I'm Director of Partnerships and Engagement. I think our paths have crossed at some point. It would be good to connect you into Lois Huff in my team, who has been the architect of that With Us Not Against Us campaign, to understand, because you're on the receiving end of some of that abuse, what messaging you think might work to the public as well, because we can sit here and pontificate about what we think might work, but you're the ones who are having to deal with that on the, I was going to say the sharp end, probably an unfortunate term in that respect, but you hear what I'm saying. The other thing is, and it's kind of parallel, Lois has done some evaluation work on that With Us Not Against Us, as Jason says, and it's across the 3 emergency services, so it's not exclusive to us. But an interesting parallel, I think, is there's been a significant uptick in abuse to things like GP receptionists. And if you think about them as gatekeepers of service in the same way that you were gatekeepers of service, there's a comparability. So I'll put you in touch, Emma, with Lois, to have that conversation about, is there anything we need to do in some of that messaging that you think would resonate more with the public than what we're currently doing? And then we can take it from there.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to you, Liam, in a moment. I think, Lee, you were next in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your sharing. I'm going to split this into 2 bits because we've got clearly the part about being the culture champion, which I'd like to come back to, but clearly some things have been highlighted that is starting to get in the conversation. So I do have a control room background. That is my background through different emergency services. So I can absolutely relate to everything that's been stepped out. And this is not a challenge, as you and I heard yesterday, actually, Chair, from our colleague in 111. This is not a challenge unique to emergency service. This is a very unique set of challenges that are faced by contact centres across industries. Customer service, service provision, when callers are after something, it's very difficult. And we were hearing from someone who's got a background in mobile phone contact centres and was talking to us actually about how difficult that was. So the challenge that we face is that, particularly with call handlers, it's an entry-level role, which means there is generally a younger demographic. This is a very low control role. There is very low control. It is fully scripted. The calls come in when they come in. There is zero control of that. So we've got entry level, low control, fully scripted, which is a very unique set of stressors. I don't necessarily sign up to people who have more stressful jobs than others, but it is a very unique set of stressors that I think our call handlers are having to manage and deal with. Clearly, what's coming through from Emma is the support that Emma can provide to her team as a call handling supervisor. And that's where I want to come back to the culture champion role of managers, because I think that there's a really interesting point in that. The reality of working, I think, in our EMSC type of environment is it can feel like the world's against you. The stresses from people who want access to service, the stresses related to delivery of performance, because the control room is vital to effective delivery of performance. And it can feel like everything's against you. And with that is a risk of being the victim. Now, I don't want to take away from what Emma's saying, but I don't believe we have that culture here in the Welsh Ambulance Service. I think it's existed of old, where it feels like everything is at the control room environment, but I would suggest that we are far more collaborative between the field component, the control room component of service delivery. And I think, and I want to highlight that. I think from the services that I've been at before, where I've seen a real us and them, I don't think we see it as that extremis here in our service, which is to be encouraged and supported through our good relationships. On the violence and aggression front, it's really, really important. And I get what you're talking about, Emma, in terms of we need to take someone off the phone to do their datix report, but I can't encourage it enough to please give us the datix reports. I see them through my one-to-ones with my assistant director, and the numbers are tiny. They are tiny, and myself and our team would like to know more, and we can only know it if you tell us. And datix is a mechanism to tell us. So it would be great if I could ask you, with your call handling supervisor colleagues, to please promote the opportunity to put the datix reports in, so we can really fully understand it. We need to do more with your people, Emma, for them to see what we are saying externally about call handlers. I was looking at Estelle as you spoke. We deliberately seek to include the call handlers in our cardiac arrest save stories. We have done violence and aggression stories externally with call handlers, so it does feature. Something's getting missed there, because we are featuring it, and I know that has happened. We're very deliberate in terms of taking it back to call handlers, and I know, Jason, if we receive thanks as well from public, we pull out the dispatch staff, the call handling staff. So there are concerted efforts, Emma. Please let me assure you. If I can then come back to the culture champion bit, fantastic, Emma, fantastic work. It's interesting, I instinctively kind of go to management. I guess, I'm the ops director, that's kind of where I go. And my reflection was that I think starting with culture champions is clearly a great way to go. But the reality is every manager should be a culture champion. When I'm listening to Emma about the work that she's been doing, and the conversation, starting conversations, talking about behaviours, reflecting that in one-to-ones, all of that stuff, every manager in our organisation should be a culture champion as a given, as a part of our job and what we do. So that was my big reflection. And I think what I would like to do, Emma, is we've got a management day coming up in June. I hope you've subscribed to that. if you haven't, please do. I would like to offer you to talk on stage to our managers about what you're doing, not as a champion, but as a leader of people. So no pressure, but I would like to invite you to come and do that, because I think there's a powerful message for managers to reflect on. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Lee. So I think probably to Liam, and then we'll go across to Peter. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as we're sat here, I suddenly had the moment. I've given apologies to an event today in order to be at Trust Board. So it's probably worth noting that today is the re-signing event for the anti-violence collaborative across Wales. That's being led by Judith Paget, who is the NHS Wales Chief Exec, Chief Constable of Gwent Police, Pam Kelly, and Jenny Hopkins, who's the Chief Prosecutor for the CPS Wales. So that is a commitment. We've been quite a lead player through our violence and aggression team in ensuring that that collaborative is reinvigorated to move and do more. I also thought it might be helpful just to give board members and ensure the public know that we do take things very seriously. At our People and Culture Committee last, we did report that 5 cases have recently gone through the legal system. 4 of them have led to community orders or financial penalties. 1 of them has led to a custodial sentence, and 1 is awaiting sentence. So I just want to give the assurance that where people put the datics in, where we are able to act, we will act. We have very good working relationships with the violence and aggression team, with the various police forces and with CPS Wales, and they are supportive of working with us to take action as and where we are able to.
Thanks very much, Liam. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Emma. Thanks ever so much for that really enlightening and candid discussion. I guess what I wanted to pick up was stress, really, because I guess we all, have stress at some parts of our lives, some more than others. So a particular interest of mine, actually, in a previous life, is the sort of things we can do to help people who work in a particularly stressful environment. And I just wonder, maybe this is a question for Angie as well, and one for you, Emma, in terms of what you feel is available to you. We know for some people, maybe going for a walk or a run or going to the gym, some sort of physical activity can actually help. For others, that's not the solution. But I just wonder the extent to which we are providing those mechanisms, and have we done work across staff to actually address how do we ensure that we can give and promote to our staff every opportunity to be able to handle those stress situations. I talk very personally. I like going for a run, and I'll say I've had really stressful meetings, and I go for a run, and you come back and you think, God, it's cleared the mind. Now, running's not for everybody, so it's not a one size fits all. But I know personally from my working life how finding something to do, when you come back, you think, thank God I did that. If I hadn't have done it, I just go round and round and round and round. So just a real question really for Emma. What do you think is available here to help you de-stress? And I guess one for Angie, what are we doing in terms of finding out what sorts of things all our staff might benefit from in such a stressful environment?
Emma, should we go back to you just to have your thoughts on that?
Everyone is different. They all have their own way of interpreting what a traumatic call may be, or what a stressful event may be. So I think the supervisors within Central and West have been absolutely brilliant. I've tried getting them on board a little bit more regarding the behaviours and the culture champions, and I've explained to them that everybody is different. A traumatic call doesn't necessarily need to be a paediatric arrest or a hanging. It's whatever that individual perceives that traumatic incident to be. So the call taker supervisors, they have been really good recently. They ask after every call, are you okay? Do you need 5? And they will encourage, take 5 minutes, go make yourself a cup of tea. Do you want to go out? That individual might smoke, or they might vape. Do you want to go out to just have a screen break? Pop out for 5 minutes, go for a little walk, get some fresh air, do something just so that they can process that information. Once the call taker comes back in, they will have a chat with the supervisor and they'll be asked, do you want a trim referral? Do you want an occupational health referral? If that individual refuses it, the call taker supervisor will say, right, have a think now for the rest of the shift. If you feel differently before you finish work, let us know and we'll put that referral in for you. And I think that needs to happen everywhere. It shouldn't just be call takers, it should be dispatch, it should be the allocators, because they're exposed to this as well. They are the ones that have to go into that call if it is a traumatic call, or they have to speak to the crews and relay that information verbally occasionally. So it should be throughout the CCC rather than just call takers as well.
Thanks very much, Emma. Is that okay, Peter?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Do you want to come back?
I was just going to come back. I mean, the broader, thank you, Emma, for bringing up some of those sort of formal processes we have. But again, what we've been doing, you know, we have a very well-equipped and well-resourced occupational health and wellbeing team. We have access immediately for colleagues to access, you know, clinical psychologists, etc. That's for the more at the formal level where something kicks in. But I think what Emma's talking about there, that sort of immediate touching base, the role of a supervisor in terms of noticing, the role of peers, culture champions, whoever it is, the ability to talk, decompress is a key part of what we're trying to achieve here as well, and making sure people do feel able. Of course, we're also reinforcing that sense of personal responsibility, as you've said, around keep yourself fit, keep yourself well, you know, take your breaks, take your annual leave, all of those bits wrap in. But I would say, you know, we're really trying with different parts of the organisation to understand what the issues are for those, and not saying generally, well, actually, everybody's experiencing this in different ways. The nature of roles is definitely an issue, but also I think we've got to be mindful of whatever the role is going on for someone, there's a lot of issues going on for them at home. We know that, and it's how we wrap ourselves around it. And just if I could come back to Lee's point, I totally agree, Lee, around, you know, for me, our managers have the fundamental role of culture champions, absolutely. But we also know peers can have just as much influence. So we're really keen that people see culture change as everybody's responsibility. But absolutely agree. The point around the checking in, noticing, talking, that is a key part of everybody's job. So thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much. Jason, you want to come back?
Yeah, just I suppose just to make a connection to a previous point we discussed in my paper, in the investment in the management structure in the contact centres, because we know at the moment that the management structure is light, very light in our contact centres. So the point about noticing, checking in, are you okay, recognising that there's been a difficult call for an individual, that's hard at the minute because the capacity just simply isn't there. So the point that we've been able to invest in the structure, and we've got a new approach, a new structure agreed, which will support that, is crucial in tackling some of the points that Emma makes.
Good, thanks, Jason. Looking around the table, any other last comments? I don't think so. So, Emma, thank you very much for giving your time today. It's been very timely, not least because I was in the call centre last night and we were talking about it earlier, and Lee was up there as well. I spent quite a bit of time up there. One of the things that strikes me when I come away, particularly from the 999 call centre, the word that echoes around my brain every time I come away from there is the word relentless. But it is a relentless environment. And I think the comment that you made about the personal challenge you have about wanting to take time off to report an abusive caller, but aware that there are a number of callers stacking up waiting for answers, and that relentless nature of wanting to do an answer within a matter of seconds when somebody puts, because you don't know whether it is a relatively minor low down on the ambers or a genuine life-threatening immediate call, and you won't know till you say hello. And I can absolutely understand that. So we hear what Lee was saying about without the information, it's difficult to quantify it. But I think that we've had a message today that the level of abuse and difficulty is considerably greater than is actually formally reported. So that's something we need to bear in mind. I would reflect also on what Jason was just saying about the fact that there is quite a lot of attention being given to the structure in the clinical contact centres, control room. I think that's absolutely right. And I think that we probably all are very aware that what is happening out on the in the ambulance world in terms of handover delays and increasing demands is actually causing, backups within the call centres, and you are the frontline staff, and I think we recognise that, and it's something that we respect very much. So thank you for coming today. It's been very helpful. I think there's a final comment. Angie, final word.
One final comment. Emma's being very, very humble. She's also at the moment, she's just finished her studying. She's just done a qualification, a master's, isn't it, Emma, in what's the master's in?
Clinical psychology and mental health.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much, for being part of our community, but also it's the above and beyond, and it's the fact that you are an exemplar in terms of that continuous desire to progress, to improve, but also role modelling exactly what we want. So thank you very much and good luck with your results.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, we echo that. Okay, thank you very much, Emma. We'll say goodbye and thank you for your time. It's been grand.
Thank you.
Bye
Thanks.
now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, good. That was, I think, very interesting. And there's certainly some takeaways there that we need to, keep in the forefront of our mind, because they are the unsung heroes. And we spend a lot of time talking about ambulance and handover delays and all of those issues. And it's very easy to forget the stresses which are going on in that relentless atmosphere of the nines. And that it's not quite as relentless, it's a different atmosphere, but it's still a very important service to the ones. Okay, we'll move on, shall we, to item number 9, which is the paper on progress on actions to mitigate avoidable harm, handover delays. It's the paper that we have regularly each month for each cycle of board reports. Jason, shall we come over to you for it?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. So I'll just pull out a couple of points in the body of the paper, and then perhaps I just want to go to the action plan this time round if I can. So we all understand, I'm not going to go through the detail of the handover position. The data tells us the position is largely static, somewhere around 23,000 hours a month continues to be lost as a result of pressure across the urgent and emergency care system. We've seen in the last couple of weeks a slight improvement in that, couple of 100 hours, 500 hours, something like that, which has translated into a little bit of improvement in AMBER response times, AMBER performance. But the pressure largely continues the same. And of course, it's important to remember that our current rosters, the rosters which were put in as part of that demand and capacity review in 2018-19, are predicated on no more than 6,000 hours a month being lost. So as soon as we go over that 6,000 hours, we just simply don't have the capacity available to respond within a reasonable time frame. So our actions in the action plan, of course, have been focused on what we can do, which is that within our control to be more efficient and effective with the resources that we have available to us. So in that connection, if we go to page 3, paragraph 4, there's just 2 points I want to draw out here, draw to our attention. So sickness and consultant close, two of the kind of efficiencies, and there are a range of others, but two efficiencies where we've been focusing effort. Whilst we've still got a way to go on sickness to get to the 6% pre-pandemic position that we found ourselves in, it is really encouraging to see that we're now under 8%, about 7.6% in March. And whilst there's still a way to go, we have to recognise where we've come from, which was a peak at about 14% as we went through the pandemic. So significant improvement in attendance. The other point I just want to draw out is on consultant close, and this is the percentages issue versus the volume issue. The efficiency target which came out of the strategic demand and capacity review was to get to 10.2% of daily volume being closed by way of hear and treat, or what we now call consultant close. We've moved that to 15% there or thereabouts every day already, and we had an ambition to get to 17%. Now we haven't hit the 17%. We're floating around, 14, 15% daily. But what's happened underneath that is that there's been a load of shifts in activity as a result of changes in the system around us. What we are doing is closing by way of consultant close or hear and treat more calls every day than we were a year ago. So if we look at February, just pick this month out at random, In February 23, there were 4,256 episodes of care which were closed by way of consultant close, i.e. we didn't respond. In February this year, there were 4,657, so 400 more, 100 a week more, 20 a day, there or thereabouts more, that are effectively and safely being closed remotely by clinicians in the contact centres than they were a year ago. So whilst we haven't hit that 70% ambition, the volume is significantly higher. On the action plan, I'll just take it to the action plan this time round, and I'm particularly going to focus on the areas of action which are within our control, which are down for us. You'll see many of these are completed. A couple remain ongoing. Some are around winter actions where more money's been deployed, say on overtime or for third-party providers, particularly with NEPs, and those actions were delivered. And we've got on 12, I've just mentioned that the kind of hear and treat or consultant close position. On action 13, you know, we've already grown, we doubled the size of the CSD last year. Sorry, on action 13, on action, that's the CSD one. 22 talks about the future service model, but we've already grown, doubled the size of the CSD last year. We're putting another, 32 posts in this year, clinical posts into contact centres. We are growing the APP workforce again this year, as Action 12 talks about. And just picking out Action 20, you know, this response logic, whilst that will further refine that later in the year, as I touched on in the previous point, there were made improvements and efficiencies there beyond what was required in the demand and capacity review. And this is our multiple attendance ratio, and bringing that down so we're using the resources that are available to us more efficiently and effectively. So there are, I think, a number of things that we can point to, Chair, where we have taken action to use the resources available to us in a smarter, more effective way in the context of the situation around us. But of course, even with all of those, as we've seen in data in other places before, we simply can't mitigate the scale of loss that we're experiencing around us. So we've made improvements in how we operate. We've arguably stabilised the performance position because it's largely static with those actions, given the pressure around us. But what we're not able to do at the moment is start to deliver improvements in performance because of the environment which we continue to work in. So I'm able to take any questions on the paper, but it provides a general update on where we are with our actions, really.
Yes, it does indeed. Kevin.
Sorry, just a broader point then. I suppose that then leads into that piece of work that's being done around corporate risks 223 and 224, and how they are, you know, how they are put in terms of organizational risk and systemic risk. So I suppose that was a takeaway from
Yeah, no, indeed. Rachel.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, I think that there's a huge amount of work that we're doing that's within our gift, but just a note, I think that commissioners are perhaps slightly increasing their interest in RED performance as a key target. So we are working on an updated improvement plan for things that within our gift, which will be largely, you know, a lot of what is in this report. But commissioners are looking for, you know, an updated sense of the things that we are able to do. And I think we mentioned in the report the updated modelling that we've been doing, which has been requested by commissioners to say, you know, what is the likely improvement in response times as a result of all this action. And what that's showing us is that clearly our actions do have an impact, and a positive impact, but the biggest impact would remain, you know, that the ambition to reduce the number of WAST hours at ED would then bring performance back into line with where we want. So just thought I'd throw that into the mix as well, in terms of where commissioners are coming from at the moment.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, just it's something that's happened only in the last few days, but it's just worth noting in terms of the context of understanding the level of harm that's occurring at a system level. So our report pulls through the harm as we've identified from a Welsh Ambulance perspective and correlated through the reporting that we see. Johnny and I have just submitted a data sharing arrangement with DHCW, which will see some of our data flowing into the National Data Resource. And we've got several priorities that we have identified for tracking patients on a pathway level to understand harm. So that's very much thinking about how we can reduce the decompensation that occurs for particularly frail or older people. We know the level of harm that occurs in Wales, and Welsh Government have got a particular interest in seeing that harm reduce. We talked earlier about stroke, and we believe that we can do some really good pathway mapping at a stroke level to understand what's in our gift, excuse me, but also understand whether the self-attenders are attending elsewhere in the system, and understand what that means for outcomes. So I think this is quite a powerful opportunity to get other system players to understand how truly working to get our handover delays down can have a direct impact on the level of harm that exists in the wider system. And also, given the financial pressures being experienced across the NHS in Wales, a significant opportunity to identify priorities for efficiencies. Because if we get this stuff right first time, if we get patients to the right clinician, into the right bed, into the right directorate of the hospital or another setting, first time, their length of stay will be lower, their outcomes will be improved, their ongoing health and care needs will be reduced. So I think that's quite an exciting opportunity for us that we're hoping to exploit over the coming weeks and months.
Good, thanks, Lynn. Kerry?
It's always a hard report, this one, isn't it? You know, quite early on in the agenda, and I was reflecting on it yesterday when I was reading it, because I think it landed not long after I joined the board. And, you know, for me, the immediate release numbers that were declined, was it 156 in one health board and 55 in another? And it, you know, so for me, so much of this is about, well, what's that telling us? So it's good to see the numbers, but it did make me reflect on the point around Cardiff and the Vale. So if the percentages, if actually what we're saying is that we're not improving the performance because there's more calls, then I think what I want to see in this is something that shows, well, how many more calls are we then responding to? Because at the end of the day, it's about patients. So there was something in the presentation of that. Is there a way in which we can show it, not only for us, but also then for our partners, that gives them confidence that we are actually supporting and helping more patients? And then there's just something on the consultant close rates for me around our ambitions. So I can see that we're making progress, and I think those numbers are really important. But there's something for me around the potential of that. You know, if we looked across the UK, who's the best at this, and what's our longer term trajectory on that? And therefore, what do we need to do to get there, maybe in small steps? So just a couple of reflections, one on the numbers and then one on the consultant close.
Okay, thanks. I think Lee wanted to come back and then probably to Andy.
Thanks, Chair. So it's really important, isn't it? I think that we read this paper alongside the paper that follows, because I think that's got the presentation of our performance consequence. And you're quite right. I mean, if I just talk about what's happening this month at the moment, we're already month to date about 1,000 red calls more than this month last year. And we have responded to about 100 more red calls in 8 minutes than last year, but the percentile is 10% down. And so, you know, this is so important, I think, that both us, the public, our commissioners look at the numbers. We are at real risk, and I think I've made this point before, of concentrating on percentiles and missing the numbers. And I think that that's really, really key. I think the reality, you know, when I was reminded by the start of this report, and how long it's actually phased, or how long we've now been at this, with additions made to it, because it hasn't rest. Yeah. We've made additions in terms of the further actions that we can take. The timeline that we've now been doing this is clearly illustrating that despite all the best internal efforts, it is not shifting the dial on the percentile red. As we've seen before with the waterfall chart, despite the increase in FTE, despite the roster changes, despite attempting to improve efficiency of dispatch logic, single response red codes being clinically supported, all of these actions that are quite right and we should be tested to take, they are not scratching the surface in terms of a percentile improvement. And there is for me a question about the value of effort in producing a red improvement plan supplementary to our IMTP, because I strongly feel that the effort of the organisation should be focused and concentrated on an IMTP, which hopefully gets final approval, as opposed to what I think could be a distraction on other actions that are not going to come close to achieving the improvement that's being sought, which is it is an improvement we should be looking for. But in the context of the system, I am concerned that it distracts from the effort we should be placing on the IMTP, which is our organisation's offer for improvement in safety and quality. And I think we need to hold tight to safety and quality alongside a percentage measure, which I think is flawed at the moment.
Good, thanks. Andy, did you want to?
First of all, fully endorse what Lee's just said there. I think there's absolutely the right angle on this. But I think just to go to Kerry's point in terms of where we'll see, if we do see improvements in handover and vehicles being released faster, before we'll see an improvement in performance, we'll see a reduction in the no sends or the cancellations.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the volume of no send and cancellations, especially the cancellations, we have a heck of a long way to go in terms of getting to the point where that unmet care need is addressed. Before we then get to the point, we'll see a reduction in performance improvement. And that's the thing I think we've got to remind ourselves. Now, we have seen pleasingly, there is a slight downward tick when you look at the MRQPR and on the number of cancellations. So you'd like to think that's the response we've got to that. But the volume is still really quite significant that we will have to address that unmet care need before we see a response to performance. I think it's we need to remind ourselves in respect to that. But I think when we have these discussions with external bodies and whatever, I think it's vital we draw the attention to that unmet care need, because that needs factoring in. If we were to put that back into the system now, we'd really be under the cosh even more than we are now.
Yeah, that's right. Because the focus is on that red number, and those other numbers, people notice them, but they kind of almost don't really figure too much in people's consciousness. Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of things. So one is that as part of the programme work this year, we've already started talking to our commissioners about a different way of measuring or looking at performance that more accurately reflects, the kind of reality of what we're trying to achieve. So interestingly, potentially, we won't have a consultant close indicator at all, because that includes some people who we deal with remotely, some people who we say get in a taxi and take yourself to ED, and actually we think there's more we could do for those patients to prevent them having to go to an ED. So we're looking at, as part of our transformation programme, a new set of performance metrics. Having said that, on the consultant close, I just think in terms of our demand and capacity review that Jason mentioned earlier, that is showing that there is the potential for quite a significant additional number of patients to be dealt with remotely. And our new kind of clinical model that Jason was talking about is designed precisely to do that, with additional capacity, different processes, different pathways. So I think there's a couple of things: new performance framework, which will better describe what we're trying to achieve and demonstrate our progress towards that, and then new clinical model, which is the one big thing that we're going to be working on this year to improve the service we provide to patients. And just to Lee's point around IMTP versus a red improvement plan, I don't think we can get away from the fact if commissioners are asking for it, but it will be based on what we're saying in our IMTP. It will just be a recut of the things that we've said in there. I don't think we're going to be adding much to it, but we'll be representing it in a way that allows them to see those things. It is additional work, as you say, Lee, but I think that's something we have to do.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. You don't want to come back to moving around. So, okay, well, I think my final summary on this would simply be that, the things that strike me that's just worth reflecting on for a moment, is that not in this paper, but somewhere else in the papers I think I was reading, that the number of lost hours in April 2024 was not significantly different to the number of lost hours last year or the year before, which I think just underlines the kind of solidity of the position that we're in terms of the issues within the wider system, and the fact that lost hours, handover days are not going to go away. And it's so important for us, therefore, to transform the service. And that links for me to paragraph 12 in this paper, which I'm so pleased to see, which I won't go through it now, people will have read it anyway, but it's a list of things which are included in this year's IMTP, which will connect to, not exclusively down to this issue, but to get together around, transformations of the service, which will no doubt have an impact. The other thing, I mean, Rachel, I don't know whether it's something that you want to pick up with other people, but it always strikes me that everybody focuses on the 8-minute target. And two things strike me about the 8-minute target. The first is that the target is 65% in 8 minutes, which presupposes that 35% won't be met with 8 minutes. So who's decided that it's okay for 35%, not 65% too? I mean, that's something in history, I suppose. And also what strikes me as well, when you look at what we actually do, we are underperforming. We're not meeting 65% in 8 minutes, but we are broadly meeting 65% in 10 minutes. And, is that 2-minute time difference significant? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not looking for an answer now, but I think there are questions that need to be asked around the very fundamental measure against which we're being asked. The questions for me are, where did it come from? What is the logic? What's behind all of that?
It goes back to the 70s.
I'm sure. And I don't want to open the debate now.
Something that was called an Orcon standard.
Yes.
We could talk about it for
I'm
weeks,
sure.
but
I'm sure.
it's got literally no basis.
No. So I think exactly, and I think two things strike me today. One is that we're chasing a target which has its legacy and history going way back, and the logic even then may be flawed, and it may certainly be flawed today. So that's one issue, and then the other issue is, as Andy was saying, that actually as we do a lot of the work to improve ambulance availability, a lot of that ambulance availability will be deployed upon things which people's attention is not on, i.e. cancellation routes and the amber response times and so on, all of which is important work and may not automatically reflect itself in the red. So there will be an assumption by those people who are measuring us, particularly in Welsh Government and elsewhere, two assumptions. One is that hitting 65% in 8 minutes is really important. And it might be, but it might not be. So I think that's a question. And the second is the assumption that if we do everything right in our service, we would improve the red, but actually we probably will be doing a lot to improve some of the amber response rates, which might go unnoticed. So somehow we've got to make, there's got to be an awareness campaign about all of this. We need to understand it, and our colleagues elsewhere need to understand it. Anyway, that's Liam.
So Colin, just listening to you there. So I recognise everything we've just described in the context, particularly of our NHS and other statutory partners. I think if I was sitting here with my PECI team's kind of observations, the benefit of us being able to get to amber 1s and amber 2s sooner would be felt in the community and talked about in the community very rapidly. So while our numbers and our formal reporting would not necessarily kind of track in the way that you're describing and give some of our external colleagues that confidence, if you like, of improvement, I'm pretty confident from the conversations that our PECI team have in the communities, talking to people every day, every week, that would be felt very quickly. I think we would feel the positive feedback from organisations like the Stroke Association, the Lung Association. So there are many other areas where we can make these changes, we can demonstrate improvement in patient experience that actually will be the closest to patients and the people that are looking out for them and advocating for them, be over and beyond the kind of wider formal stuff that maybe we all capture. And I think that's really important for us, because it's their confidence that probably means most to us in terms of people feeling they can ring 999, get a response and be heard, consulted with, sent a resource as they need it.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think that's where you get that kind of dilemma that the people that we are serving is the community. They're the more important people. And there are certain people who are focusing on red response, and that's the only thing they're focusing on. And I think what I'm saying there is a lot of the work that we do in improving and transforming our services may not directly influence rate response, which therefore for some people who are observing us may feel that we haven't succeeded. Actually, we will feel we've succeeded and the public will feel we're succeeding. So we need to kind of make that bridge. So everybody's in the same place, looking at the same things, understanding what the data tells them. I think on this paper, it's great to have it. I'm sure we'll have it next time because we need to be seen particularly to focus on this issue. But it is a wider context issue. It's not just about ambulance response. And I think that the items which are listed in the IMTP on that paragraph 12 show that actually improvements all over the piece in what we do within the ones and the nines and the contact centres and clinical support and all the other things that we're doing will have benefits in terms of harm, directly or indirectly. Good, thank you very much. What I suggest we do, we're planning to have a break now at 11 o'clock. We're running at one item behind on the agenda, but I suspect we'll catch up as we go on. So why don't we take the break now? And if we can, it's just gone 11. So if we can try to get back by 11:15, that would be fantastic. And then we'll press on with the agenda. So take a break, back at 11:15. Right. So Chris will join us, I'm sure, very shortly. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, anybody who's watching from external perspective, this in public board meeting. Second half, and we're on to item number MIQPR section. Who's taking that?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So we've covered a fair bit of the topic within the last paper, so I won't comment on those, but I will just pull out some of the performance on the 111 side. You'll see, looking at the graphs, we've had a number of months over the last year that had excellent performance with call abandonment rates below 5%. And you'll note that the last couple of months now, we've had a slight uptick or downturn, an increase in the proportion of people who are abandoning their calls. Now, this was expected. It was partly as a result of recruitment having to be paused as the training team were concentrating on training existing staff on the new system. We knew that staff in post had to be abstracted for training on the new system themselves. And as the system has gone live, we know that obviously staff are starting to understand the system, get used to the system. It's likely to be a little bit slower. So we were expecting a downturn in performance, which you can see has happened for all the reasons that we had expected. So we're just, the reason for kind of pulling that out is to note obviously that that's not where we want it to be. It will improve. But just to note, the commissioners have again brought that to our attention and raised some concerns at the last 111 programme board. That will be at the last programme board, specifically on 111, as Jason mentioned earlier. We'll be transitioning to the new JCC arrangement. So I just wanted to pull that out, but it was entirely as expected. The other things just to note, you might have seen in the report that we've seen a good improvement in the response rates to complaints. It's still not quite where we want to be, but up at 62%, that's a massive improvement on where we have previously been in the last few months. So that's really good. And although Jason's pulled out our people metrics, we've seen some great stuff in terms of sickness absence, but we've also seen continued reductions in our turnover rates. We've seen improvements in our PADR rates. We've seen improvements in our mandatory training rates. It's not quite where we want them to be, but it's going in the right direction. So I just thought I'd pull that out. There's some work that's been done well across the organisation and by managers across the patch. So happy to take any other further questions, Chair, of any detail. Thank you.
Okay. So a lot of data contained in the dashboard, and a huge amount of information in the graphs that follow it. Any questions from anybody?
Just one quick observation really was if I read it correctly, the demand 18% higher for 111 in the last quarter. I know we touched on it, but it just seems really significant. We thinking it's peaks and troughs, or any thoughts behind that? Because our ability to respond if that demand keeps going up,
So one of the things we've got in our IMTP, in which we'll be delivering this year, is a demand and capacity review in 111. So as part of that review, we'll be looking in a lot more detail, I guess, at what the reasons are behind that increase in demand. Is that likely to continue? Is it just a service that it does experience peaks and troughs, which we need to think about how we manage our capacity? So that will be the response. I think we'll do quite a lot of detailed work. I don't know if anybody else has got any, or Lee, whether you've got any. I haven't heard of any sense of there being a particular reason for an uptick in demand. But
I mean, I'm with you, Rachel. I think the demand and capacity, the work for that will give us a detail that we have not yet managed to get to. For me, one of the big tests as well will be around the in hours versus the out of hours, and perhaps what's happening in hours, which may or may not be linked to the pressures that we're aware of in primary care, as an example. So I think there's nothing that immediately comes to mind. It just emphasises how important that DNC modelling is for us.
And I think my other observation on that is through the Vice Chairs Forum, they're talking about demand and capacity review in relation to primary care. So I guess the question is how, is that different? Does it correlate? What does that tell us? So it's probably a useful context in that work.
I'm meeting with the lead for primary care in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a few of us meeting her. So we're trying to get better connections with the work that they're doing. So that might be an interesting piece to go at in terms of if they're doing demand and capacity reviews there as well, trying to link those pieces of work together because it's all part of that same kind of system. So that's useful. Thank you.
No, okay. Liam, sorry.
Yeah, it's just building on that primary care interface. So we know that what we're hoping in the rollout of 111 as we move into the new world and on the back of the 6 goals that we would expect and hope that 111 plays an increasing role in supporting primary care. So I would just probably take this kind of moment to note our intent. Our expectation is that we see 111 grow as the gateway to care, and specifically the opportunity to think about how 111 can support primary care with direct booking. So, initial prioritization, initial understanding where people might need to go in the system and where it's primary care move to a position where we can think about direct booking. That sits within the contact center, but I think the other thing that will come through on the back of this is the digital opportunity that we have in front of us. So we have now got a new system which is operating. That gives us the potential to think about our digital platforms, our interface with the NHS app, and our interface between ourselves and our other partners. So there's some exciting opportunities there that actually could change the shape of how we deliver the service from a human perspective and from a digital perspective. And then the final thing is just to note, there was a report demonstrating a pilot that's taking place in London, which I think will provide interest to us, where London Ambulance Service have been sitting in that role as acting as an interface into primary care for a primary care network. And that looks like it's had some positive results. So I think our discussion may change. We may see continued growth, but we might look to manage that growth in quite a different way using digital capability. And also we would hope to plan for some growth, which allows primary care to be focused on those patients that are most frail, most complex, most in need, and that would be a way we could contribute into the system and hopefully assist.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that, Kerry, and it sort of picks up both points really, the demand and capacity bit and the future plan. 111 historically has been seen as a sort of new service. Well, I think this is perhaps an indication of it's now established as a service. People are using it, where before they may have been unaware or they may have used it, in extremis. And we just need to be quite careful in our thinking around it because, in the messaging, we're asking people to use 111. Health boards are asking people to use 111 to defray demand from the wrong end of the system. So if we weren't seeing an uptick in the use of 111, I would be more concerned because it would mean that those people were still materializing either in our 999 service or in EDs. So it's just that demand and capacity bit is well made and the future plan is well made, but actually what we should see is people will repeat use the service if they've had a good experience of it. So certainly on the telephone based element of the service, I would like to think that we're perhaps seeing, if I can use the phrase, repeat customers, which is driving up demand because they've had a good experience of us. So we just need to be careful that we're not worried about the penny in the bun. We worry about people calling it 999 inappropriately. This is the alternative. So we mustn't be worried about seeing additional demand. It's just a question of are we geared up for it? And picking up Liam's point, some of the work that we absolutely must do around the digital offer to make that available to those for whom a digital offer is both welcome and appropriate.
Can I just a quick comment on paragraph 20, the PADRs. Improving up to 78.46%. It would be really interesting to know what the percentage of those available to undertake PADRs is rather than 78.46% of 100%. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there will inevitably be some members of staff who will, for legitimate reasons, not be available to undertake a PADR. And understanding that would make more sense of the numbers, I think. Just in terms of, is the challenge really over 20%, or is the challenge really 10%? Because 10% have legitimate reasons for not being available. Just an observation.
Yeah, in the sense it's unrealistic to ever get to 100% because there'll be people on long-term sick and there'll be people for a variety of
Exactly
reasons
all
too.
of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So even in a perfect world, you wouldn't have 100%.
The target should be 100% though.
Any other questions or comments on the MIQPR? The only comment I would make, perhaps in summary, is, it was just interesting last night being in the 111 call centre, listening to calls and just responding or reflecting really what Estelle was saying, the increasing demand. I think, although it's only anecdotal, what I saw just on the first 4 calls, to some extent, I think reflect some of the changes within the community that we are aware of. 2 of the first 4 calls were dental, where people had tried to manage dental symptoms. One was a broken tooth, which was now developing to an abscess. Pain over a week had gradually increased and getting to a point where they needed help. And the other was some kind of a swelling and pain in the jaw. Again, we know dental services are under huge stress, but there is one of the measures on the IMPQR on the dashboard. Trying to get the initials out on the dashboard is about increasing numbers of dental. So I saw that last night, and 2 of the cases that I listened into, which were long conversations between a nurse and the patients, actually there were medical issues, but there were medical issues significantly exacerbated because of mental health issues, where relatively mild symptoms of pain and other things were considered to be far worse than they probably really were. And actually what the nurse did was a fantastic job in calming the 2 individuals down and giving good advice. So that's just reflecting that we are going to see more demand from the 111 service, not least because of mental health issues and dental health issues and lack of GPs. One of the quarters I listened into was trying to get a GP appointment and had succeeded in getting one on the 11th of June for something which they really needed to see. And actually the result was there, good advice about how to go back to the GP and actually try and stress the need to be seen, because that person did need to be seen.
And just on dental share, we've just literally done some communications assets on dental, specifically because of the uptick in queries around dental, to try and support people with where best to go with their various dental issues. So I'm not surprised we're seeing, it confirms what we know, your experience.
I suppose in some way, I'm just thinking it reflects on what you were saying. I think, Andy, in the bed about a lot of the work that we do goes unseen because so much of the focus of attention of some people is on red response rates, when actually a lot of the work that goes on in the ones and in the amber calls actually goes unseen, but is incredibly necessary, because people out there are not in life-threatening conditions, but if you've been suffering with raging toothache for a week and you've nowhere to go and no one to talk to, it's a very significant issue for that particular person at that time.
Just need probably just for wider confidence and audience. So from a dental demand perspective, we've been working very closely with the 6 Goals team. We have dental advisors that operate within the 111 service and support delivery, and also we have got some direct routes now through 111, which are linking through and in with health boards, certainly in the out of hours period. So I think it's just noting that there is a very strong connection between ourselves and 6 Goals in terms of the understanding of dental needs assessments and what that's telling us and what provision looks like and how we can support patients. And I'll just make one link back to the earlier comments that we had on 9s in particular, but actually it's critical for what we're doing in our remote care. And what we've seen with the new 111 system is that we've been able to use our experience and to ensure that non-clinical call takers or non-clinicians are able to come to dispositions where the person making the call is directed to the most appropriate place first time. So we've been able to increase that and do that to a greater extent. We have a very clear plan. So your comment earlier on some of the demographic details and entry, we will be moving to using the Welsh Demographic Service within our system soon. And we will also be enabling all of our remote clinicians across the organisation in 9s and 1s to access the Welsh Clinical Portal. So that better informs clinical decision making and consultation. And all of that plays into the final comment, which is our intent with what we are planning to do is to enhance the level of practice across all of our clinicians and our call takers to support people as best we can first time, not just in the use of our service, but in the use of the wider NHS. And for 111, that's critical. And so building the confidence, the competence and the understanding of all of our clinicians' knowledge, enabling that and giving confidence to others in their decision making in order that services are directly accessed. All of the things that we talk about from a paramedic on the front line in an EA actually becomes very true of what we need to do remotely as well. So come back to the demand. We want, in some ways, we want demand to go up in UEC, in 111 and urgent emergency care in that space, because what it allows other clinicians in other places to do is receive patients that they are best placed to care for and not have to filter at every single level. So that demand profile will go up for all the reasons we described, but what we have to do with it is continue to grow our clinical workforce to meet that need and to better signpost people into the system or enable them to self-care through various means of their own.
No, and I can confirm absolutely that on those 2 dental cases, that's exactly what happened. But in both cases, they were automatically connected with urgent dental services in North Wales, in both cases, funnily enough, with the expectation anyway that the emergency dental services provided by the health board would make contact with them directly. So that loop was hopefully reconnected in both cases, which is what should be happening. Okay, any other final questions? We're asked to note the data, which we duly do. All right, let's move on. Chris, we started and Jason started talking about finances, so we now circle round to finances. And over to you, Chris. I think
we missed a couple. Sorry.
Have we missed them?
Sorry.
We're on item 11, Chair.
How long was I in the toilet?
Oh, my apologies. My apologies. We have.
Too much info already.
We have.
Sorry.
I should be. I'm so keen. I turned 2 pages over. Right, indeed. Yes.
I can do whatever now, but like just to people who want to go in. I think
Chris, no, you can relax. It's incompetent chairing yet again.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I'm 3 people away. No, only 1 person away from the board sector. Her pen was poised.
Yeah.
It's her yellow notes, but you've no notes handy. So right. Okay, right. So good. All right. So we've missed number 11, haven't we? Which is, so I haven't missed it, but we're coming to it. Number 11, the risk management. So Trish, your moment in the spotlight.
Thanks, Chair. So the board's got the full risk report in front of you as usual. But the exec summary draws out, as we agreed, those 5 highest rated risks. All of the committees have reviewed these in this quarter as well. So you'll see in their AAA reports that comes through. So I'll just draw out a couple of these highest rated risks. So as Kevin pointed out with 223 and 224, a lot of the discussion we had in the patient harm and mitigation action plan. But you'll also see in the bigger BAF, in the BAF document, scattering through this, the additions are in blue. So you can see actually actions that we are taking are turning into controls as well. So these are being reviewed on a constant basis. So there's 223 and 224 are quite closely aligned. And also we've got sort of further mitigations and transformative actions in the IMTP to address those as well. And obviously the AAAs from Quest deals with that in a bit more detail. On 160, a significant number of actions have been added to this risk since the last review. And you'll see also that the controls and assurances have been strengthened as well. And Kerry might want to come in here, but the PCC, People and Culture Committee AAA report also draws out in the staff story some of the work that the managers in the trust are doing to support their teams to get back to work and reduce sickness locally, as well as some of those themes and trends that are coming through in the NHS staff survey as well, and the action plans that go with that. On 201, People and Culture Committee also undertook a deep dive in that. And if you look at their AAA report, you'll see a section in the risk section on that reputation risk, sets it out in a bit more detail. And we've also got a board development session in June on this as well. So we'll have a bit of a further deep dive on that. Risk 594, the CEO's report set out the plan for consideration of the recommendations of the Manchester Arena inquiry. And the board will see these in more detail in board development in June and then back into the board in July as well. So I think the detail in the report shows that risks have reduced in score. Some of them have closed. We've got a couple of new ones that have been added onto the register, and they'll be reviewed by the committees during this quarter as well. So I think hopefully the board can see that movement and the additionality in the actions and the controls. You'll be able to see that as evidenced as well in the AAA, that these are being dynamically reviewed and there's lots of oversight at the highest level on a constant basis, particularly with these top 5 that get reviewed every month. So there's a couple of recommendations there just to note, Chair.
Yep, indeed. Okay, any questions to Trish in relation to risk? The risk register doesn't look like it.
I've
Yes.
only got one.
Okay.
Thanks, Trish. Really, really comprehensive. As a new guy coming in, it's really good to see how well this is managed. So thanks to you and everybody for that. My point is relatively minor because I can't find a substantial point on it, but it's to do looking at Chris. I will bring him in early actually rather than later. And it actually part of it is sort of so I understand how it works in terms of how updated. But you look at 424 and 139, which are linked with the finances. Clearly, it's a risk if we don't have the money, capital and revenue to deliver what we need to do, then there's going to be issues. But my question specifically, sort of right here, right now, as I understand it, it's capital rather than revenue that's of a particular risk. A, because our allocation was pretty good in terms of revenue, and secondly, we know that in terms of our capital allocations, we're not able to replace our fleet in exact timelines that our replacement program would suggest. And we know there could be financial consequences in terms of maintenance. We've also heard elsewhere it's going to come up about having old fleet might mean that the diesel fumes come in and all that kind of issue, which I guess comes down to the fact that there's a risk around capital funding. So I wonder in terms of this, what I can't see here is that right here, right now, that, it's capital rather than revenue that's keeping us awake. So I think that is the case. So really it's just a question about the process. How up to date is this to really drill down into, in terms of our resources now, what are we really, really worried about? And is it capital? Revenue was a good settlement. We'd always like more, clearly. But I just wonder how up to date are we in terms of really articulating the current risks.
Okay, Chris, yeah,
I'll start. And then others, obviously. Yeah. Thank Peter. So it's good. Quite a couple of things I think I'd respond probably right. 424 is about resource availability. So it's not just about money. It's about people and expertise and competence and skills and all that sort of stuff. So obviously there's a read across to 139, as you say. The question around how up to date, I would argue that actually it is pretty dynamic and pretty up to date. That isn't to say that the points you raised are not relevant, because they absolutely are. I would say that yes, currently our revenue position feels reasonable for the coming year, although there are some risks still within, and we'll touch on a little bit of that when we get on to the month one paper in a second. There is some, depends on how certain things may fall. There could be some chunky items that could shift that one way or the other, even now, sort of fairly soon in the year, which we just need to keep on top of and make sure we've got mitigations in. The capital's a good one, because you're right, we haven't specifically got a called out separate specific risk capital funding issues or whatever. Or I think some of that does manifest itself into other risks, because we have an emergent decarbonisation risk, for example, which is put up predominantly capital funding issues, and some of the other risks are probably as a consequence of it. But I think the vehicle one is probably one that we would probably look to potentially consider the need for a specific vehicle fleet risk going forward. But I would argue that we're probably only now just at that point of needing to perhaps think about and develop that. And why I would say that was because a couple of things. One, we've only literally had the funding confirmation of this year's money now compared to what we asked for in the last couple of weeks. And two, we're therefore now doing two things rapidly. We've done the one, pretty much completed it. Just need to bring it through governance. I went to a fleet stock delivery group yesterday. So that's, the one is, what are we going to do with the reduced money that we've had this year now compared to what we asked for? And we confirm what we're going to do with procuring vehicles this year. But the second one, which will run now probably in the next 6-8 months, will be, what is our future outlook for fleet look like compared to what we had still remaining from a previous 10-year endorsed strategic plan with government, which still had another 2 or 3 years to run, but is not now being able to be funded to us on an annual basis and hasn't for a couple of years. So there's some work, a workshop away with the team early next week to continue, but fully sort of press ahead now with that work, which will run, as I say, in through the next few months in tandem with us developing the business case for next year, which will be the first year of what this new 3 to 5 year outlook for fleet will start to look like, which will be different, which will inevitably be different because we'll have to accept we're clearly not getting the money that we would have wanted or needed to keep up with the pace of the previous fleet replacement program. So we have to accept that, but it also gives us the opportunity to bring in other things that are emerging in the fleet space and also what fleet we might need based on changes to our clinical model potentially going forward, where we can still press ahead with some of the electrification and decarbonisation of the fleet. And I guess alongside that bit of work, we can then consider how much we need to flag or consider separating out a risk around the impact of what that might look like compared to what it should look like based on the existing SOP, if that makes sense. So it's probably now the time to consider about a separate, particularly fleet. So because the rest of the capital, we could always spend more, we could always do it more, can we? But we've got a good process in place of prioritising what we spend from our discretionary capital. We do punch above our weight a little bit in terms of some of the additional or Wales capital we've attracted, particularly for some of the decarbonisation, estates, fire sort of stuff over the last couple of years. So you're right to put out this, it is the fleet probably impact going forward. The short-term impact of which we've always said is probably more of a cost one. It's a revenue cost one because we'll have to run our vehicles longer, older. There'll be more breakdowns, more repairs needed. But there's only there's a finite impact of that as well. At some point, there'll be a tipping point of it having other impacts that we may have to consider in considering a risk in that way. So I think we'll work on that as we do this piece of work over the next few months.
Thank you. I mean, look, just to build on everything that Chris has said, I mean, this is the third consecutive year that we haven't secured the level of capital funding for fleet replacement that we've signalled we need. So, on the basis that it's the third consecutive year, my working assumption now is that we have to assume that the level we've attracted in the last 3 years is what we're going to attract going forward. So that means that we need to take a different look, a different view, if you like, on the type of fleet that we operate, which Chris has referred to, and clearly, we do need to think about creating a risk on the register for that, certainly in the short term, whilst we transition to whatever the new fleet may look like. But we're in a place now where we have to assume that we're not going to attract what we used to get before. And therefore that clearly is going to mean a different approach. Because it largely is roughly it's 50%, Chris, isn't it?
It's landed at about 50% of what would be required for us to do as per our strategic plan, the replacement. And this is all replacement, there's no additionality in this. This is all about just replacing old for new and keeping our vehicles up to the asset lives that they should be, etc. in that kind of context. So it's been broadly about 50% of what's required. So accepting that that's probably the kind of level that we're looking at going forward. We need to see how we smooth the impacts, minimise the impact on that around and the various mixes of fleet and smooth that impact to equalise it across as much of the fleet as we can. Where does the prioritisation of some of that sit, in terms of usage of vehicles and the like, but also how we can change some of the mix of the fleet, maybe some of the types and models of fleet that we use to maximise the value of the money that we will hopefully still be getting, even at a reduced level.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ben. Trish, you want to?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of process things, Peter. So on the review, so there's the review dates on each of the BAFs, but those lower rated risks don't get reviewed as much. So the red rated risks, 15 to 25s, are a monthly. Arguably, they're not going to move much in the month, but they are reviewed monthly. The others are reviewed quarterly. But I think Finance and Performance Committee look at these every 2 months, particularly the finance ones. But on 139, we've kept that on the corporate risk rate on this BAF because we wanted to keep an eye on it. But normally at 8, it wouldn't be on there. And if you look at 283, we've de-escalated it, but we made a conscious decision to keep it on there because we weren't sure how it was going to move. So it is quite sort of dynamic as far as that's concerned. And I think a lot of this will change as we move into the strategic BAF later on in this year, because the board will see something very different. Although these are our principal risks, the board will be looking at the strategic BAF as a whole related to our strategic objectives. So this will move, and the audit committee will have a key part to play in how that plays out, and you'll see that coming in the next couple of meetings as well.
Thank you. Okay, no more questions to Trish on the risk. There are various things we were asked to note there, the risk scores going down, de-escalation risks, and new risks being added, and so on. So we've all noted those various items. So if everyone's content with that, we'll move on. So we move on to item 12. Still not you, Chris. No, but almost. Very nearly. We are getting closer. Item 12, integrated medium-term plan. Look back and look forward.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to take this as read, and it's a paper that also went to Finance and Performance Committee, so it's been discussed there. I just wanted to say this is the kind of formal year-end position, so kind of a big thank you to people across the organisation, because although, yes, there were some things we didn't quite do in the way that we had hoped to do, a large proportion of those deliverables were achieved, and as we know, we've got lots to look forward to in the next year as well. But it's, we've got a great track record of this organisation of working really well together across directorates to make a big difference. So it's big thanks from me, and I'm happy to take this as Red's chair in the sense of have to take any questions then.
I think that's right in terms of the look back and the look forward. I guess we still haven't heard officially, have we, whether it's been approved?
No, it will. We understand that it might be the end of June. It was well into the autumn last year, wasn't it? But we've been told it will hopefully be the end of June.
Let's hope so. So any questions either on look back or
Just to
forward?
reinforce the scrutiny from Finance and Performance Committee that Rachel mentioned, with quite a discussion. So.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Speaking on behalf of Jogger, I think this morning.
One of my hats.
One of your many hats. Yes, you need to have a row. Excellent. So if we're all content, we're asked to note the paper and the contents of the paper, which we duly do. Well.
What a build-up.
What a build-up.
This is going to be such an
due to my expert on the board chairing, I can now confirm that we are at item number 13.
Lucky for some.
Unlucky for some. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it'll be a right down. So I've got 2 papers here. So to item 13, this paper went to Finance and Performance Committee. So again, I'll take it as read and obviously take any questions, although there were some answered at the committee. This one in particular is brought through more so for completeness. There's a slight change from certainly perhaps at board level what we've done in the past. I think we've done this probably via FPC for the last couple of years, and before that not at all, because it was always an interesting one that we would build, throughout the year, significantly detailed sort of finance performance papers up to the March board when we'd have the month 11 performance. And then the year end would come and go and disappear. The next thing we would see basically was the accounts at audit committee, actually, not finance committee necessarily, or audit committee, and then through the board for ratification. And of course, the accounts has a slightly different, quite different technical lens on the performance of the year. So we've, as I say, for the last couple of years, certainly through FPC, but now for board, brought through what would have been or is the month 12 position we would consider. Now, obviously, it's a slightly different ask in some ways because it's past the post in many ways. You can't influence it. It's gone but it's brought through for completeness in that way. But it does, as it currently stands, confirms the has been referenced already today, the delivery of all the trust statutory financial duties, which have now been presented as such, our draft accounts that were submitted to Welsh Government and Audit Wales by the deadline of the 3rd of May. As I say, this paper itself was presented to Finance Performance Committee on the 14th of May. We had a couple of questions there which were answered. All of that within the context of the detail within this, and then obviously within the detailed accounts, which you'll see in a month's or a couple of months' time, is all subject to audit, which is very much ongoing at the minute. It's not even quite halfway through yet, the audit period. So a lot of detailed auditing of those draft accounts being done, which will inevitably see some variation between the draft accounts and the final accounts for adjustments, which we will agree with the auditors as we go through the audit process, which shall follow through, as I say, through to audit committee and board then in the separate meetings we've got in the middle of July. But happy to take any questions on this one.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. And I don't know, Kevin, whether you wanted to say anything on behalf of Jogger and your colleagues in the financial.
I just reinforce what Chris said there, and other colleagues that were there. I mean, we had a really lengthy, detailed conversation around all the issues that Chris has raised. So assured.
Okay, so
unless you've got something, Peter.
I just want to add very quickly, there was a scrutiny, and just to congratulate Chris and the team, because I've been through this in a different environment, and to land the proverbial jumbo on a postage stamp is not easy. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that, I know. So well done to everybody who's got this. Clearly it's subject to audit, but Kevin's absolutely right. There was a lot of scrutiny in terms of a lot of detail and questions that aren't relevant here. But I think we did get the assurance that these figures are pretty good. So fingers crossed for the audit. So well done, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. We also asked to note about the savings plan, and I think, Andrew, you had the poison chalice, didn't you, of the what the term is now, but you were the officer responsible for delivering £6 million worth of savings.
Not quite all of it, Chair. No.
Not quite all of it?
No.
But some of it.
You can claim it if you want to.
I won't claim it. It was an absolute organisational response, and particular shout out must go to ops colleagues who really provided a significant amount of that, but also everybody who participated as part of our sort of recruitment controls, and particularly Chris in terms of I was going to say partner in crime, but that really isn't the right approach for finance, is it? So, but thank you.
Well, I think we should reflect it, because I mean, it's the second year running that we've had a £6 million saving, and again we've got it this year, and as the year goes by it gets more and more difficult. And it's just a note on here to say we note the savings, but we should comment, I think, on that a great job was done. And meeting the financial targets was in no small measure helped by those savings. Okay, well, the good news is, Chris, that item 14 is also yours.
Indeed. So thank you, Chair. Again, take the paper as read. Obviously, nothing stops. So here we go again. New financial year now. So this is the first financial performance report brought through for 24-25, just on the month 1 April position. It builds on a presentation that Finance Performance Committee received, so the paper wasn't, because of timing of I think the meeting was on the actual day that we submit the returns into government. So we presented the majority of the detail that this paper has been built up around then to the committee on the 14th of May, as I say. It's 1 month. It's the first month. I was saying at the committee, and I think Peter's in the same position. We're old enough to remember when we didn't used to do a month one. You wouldn't have a clue really what the financial position of an organisation was like until probably mid of June, when you had a month two position, if you were lucky, sort of thing. So things have moved on, fortunately. And Peter did ask the question about how complete is a month one position, and I think it is a there are certain returns in that which would be submitted to government that you don't need to do as a month one, but they're probably more around the capital and other parts of the position rather than the revenue position. In terms of the actual position, in terms of phasing of the budgets that were approved at the board, in terms of the actuals that have been spent in that month against those budgets in the way in which they're phased, it's as robust as any other month is now. So it is a true position of where we are. But like I say, obviously, bearing in mind the context of it being early days in terms of the year with just 1 month's data. So therefore, the lot of it, therefore, you will recognise is actually quite consistent with that which was in the financial plan itself, either the plan in the IMTP or the separate budget setting paper that came through, in particular around some of the risks and assumptions built into the position in the first month. A couple of things just to note. You see that there's a reinstatement, thankfully, now of a directorate analysis, which we had to sort of remove a little bit, not remove, but we didn't necessarily report in the way that we have previously and will do going forward now last year because of the nuances of some of the changes in the income assumptions that were made halfway through the year compared to the initial budget set last year throughout. A couple of them, particularly in operations and on the income side. So that became a bit more meaningless as we went into the latter part of last year. So that's been reinstated and continue now throughout this year. Obviously, as 1 month, you'll see minimal variation, across all of the delegated budgets, which you'll see in the table on paragraph 11. There are some elements remaining in reserves. Myself and Jason have started and are continuing our one-to-ones, one-to-twos, two-to-ones, however you want to describe it, sort of just delegated budget discussions with directors, which explains, the month one budget that is being asked to be signed off, consistent again with the budget that the board approved at the end of March as part of that. But also again reconfirming that which is currently held in reserve for each delegated budget area, but which will be dedicated into the budget as we go through the year and as we enact some of the additionality and spend in this year's plan that perhaps we haven't had in previous year's plans, and some of the phasing around some of that. So it's to pull that out and to highlight that. The key assumptions and income levels, and importantly, I suppose, the things which we continue to not assume or assume in a different way, I suppose, in the costs or forecast in particular for this year is still key, and in particular the 3 items referenced in paragraph 25. There is continuing need every month to submit a risk analysis into government, and so we've quantified some of the risks. We're not able necessarily to quantify all of them at this very early stage in the year. We look to quantify more again as we can in month 2 and certainly by the end of Q1 around what some of those risks might be. So this does come back to the previous point, previous discussion around risk in the context of, yes, we've had a good settlement, we're in a reasonable good position revenue, we've got a balanced position. Month 1, we've got a forecast balanced position, and we've got an element of reserve to offset, and feed in for the additionality and spend that's been agreed as part of the IMTP. But there are risks already quantified, and there are more to come in terms of quantification. And in particular, those items within paragraph 25, I would draw out as being the areas of, not quantified as risks yet, but the assumptions that are made within it, which were consistent again with the assumptions clearly in our plan that we approved in the board, and continue to be relevant and continue to be live and consistent with that which we're reporting both in terms of the year to date, and we'll continue monthly to report on a year to date position until something changes to mitigate or materialize or crystallize some of those risks, and it's certainly the basis on which our year-end forecast break even is built upon. So I think that's probably something to mainly note there. The only thing I was going to add just alongside this is a very brief reference to capital in year. But Finance Performance Committee did receive a detailed capital programme update paper. Obviously, capital takes that a little bit longer, and there's a little bit slower start, if you like, in the year as we approve things through the governance mechanisms to get spend in place. It does make a few passing paragraph references to the initial capital programme and confirms the fleet monies that we touched on just now. But like I say, just to note, as alongside that, a detailed update was provided. And in particular, the full discretionary capital programme in some detail was presented to F&P on the 14th of May as well.
Good, thanks. Thanks very much, Chris. And obviously, from 1 month in, an awful lot could happen in the remaining 11 months. But Kevin, did you want to add anything in terms of FPC? Any questions too? So month 1, it's just an indication of the direction of travel, and we're asked to note various things, including the Welsh Government monitoring returns. Okay, if everybody's content, we'll move on. Yep. Okay, to item 15, which is a tutorish annual board committee effectiveness.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a large pack of papers that we get this time every year and represents the annual effectiveness review for the board committees and the advisory group, which is the Welsh Ambulance Service Partnership Team, WAST, for 2023-24. I won't go through each of these, otherwise we'll go well into lunch, but I'll give a brief overview. But I wanted to be clear that all of these have been through the individual committees, and the full pack has been through the audit committee on the 30th of April. So these will all be very familiar to the people around the table. So you'll see that there are all but the charity committee effectiveness review is here, because that will be presented to the corporate trustee in a separate meeting this afternoon. But there are no issues to draw out for the board with respect to the charity committee as a result of that review. The board delegates a significant amount of work to our committees, and it is a really important part of our corporate governance framework. And I think that's really well set out in this Appendix 1, which is a matrix of what the committee remits are. And because of this, an effective committee structure is really vital to our framework. Make sure that it operates effectively, ethically, and responsibly. And whilst these regular reviews are really quite labour intensive for all involved in these, I think they are necessary to make sure that those mechanics and dynamics of our framework are fit for purpose. And it also demonstrates our commitment to our duty of quality as well. The audit committee has agreed an amended approach to the questionnaires for next year to increase engagement, and that might be something that Peter might want to comment on. The reflections of the board itself on its operating arrangements are set out in the paper at 14.1. A significant amount of really good work drawn out there, and some proposals for future development, which will include in the program of work, including sort of those increased discussions on strategy, which we're having more and more of, the integration more of the AAA reports throughout the flow of these meetings, reductions in the volume of information, which is always the holy grail of any board, and challenge and visibility. So we'll make sure that we're working on those in the year, and you'll see a big list of those improvements at 14.2 as well, which the audit committee will keep an eye on. So all of the annual reports you've got follow a similar recipe, if you like. So they give an overview of the purpose and remit of each of the committees, its membership and attendance record for the year, which across all committees have been very good. They've all met as scheduled. They've all been quorate on each occasion. And the committee's collective view on their effectiveness, with good practice areas drawn out and areas for improvement, are set out in all of them as well. But I think what's really important to draw out is the huge volume of work that these committees get through, which is set out in some really great detail in these reports. And it's always sort of quite interesting when you get to the end of the year and really start going through that, to see the volume of work that these committees go through and then report and escalate through their AAAs. And lastly, the annual report looks back at the priorities and sets new priorities for this year. That's not additionality on their remit, but it's a particular focus on areas, and the board's got that as a separate annex. So the recommendations as endorsed by the audit committee, which if approved will soon become the Audit Risk and Compliance Committee, the ARAC, is to review these internal and external sources of assurance and be assured as to its own effectiveness and the effectiveness of those committees and the advisory group, and also approve the terms of reference and note the priorities, please, Chair.
Good. Okay, that's fine. So are there any questions in relation to, as you say, a very large bundle of papers? Yeah.
Not a question really, but I think an observation from me is just that it's quite an extensive piece of work, and but I think, Tris, you and your team always have an eye on quality, and I think that we're in that process of continuous improvement for committees, and I think that's part of our culture. And I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team for that work, because I think it's really important and it makes a big difference.
Good. Okay, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to echo Kerry's comments. Again, as the new guy, it's so refreshing to see such, great work. I guess the only plea from me, and one observation is, can we get the participation rates up? And I've been thinking about this, and inevitably there's going to be questionnaire fatigue when some people have 4, 5, 6 to do. That does happen. However, given the great work that we do when we do get the forms, I think just a I guess, can we all think of ways possibly to increase that? One thought I've had, and I'm going to, in terms of just the audit committee that may work, because we're actually going to stick to the National Audit Office questionnaire, which is quite long, is that rather than do it once a year and be faced with a big long set of questions, could we break the questionnaire and the themes up into bite-sized chunks throughout the year and almost complete it quarter by quarter, such that when you do come to the end of the year, you're not faced with a huge long, and that's just one idea that may help and sort of adds to the sort of continuous improvement. But in terms of other committees, as Trish alluded to, I think it is sensible to reduce the questions to a manageable 3, which essentially are what's working well, what could we do better, and what are the training and development needs. I would hope that would mean we'll get an increased participation rate, but just a plea from me and everybody really around the room is, this is great work, and let's get those percentages up as best we can for the next time that we do this. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Peter. And I think for anybody watching outside, we started the meeting in my usual brief description of the role of governance on this board. I think this paper shows just how deep each of the individual committees go in terms of its forensic analysis of the progress in specific subject areas. It doesn't take long when you start looking at all of this, and particularly some of the attachments like that 14.1. I think that little table is showing where all the boards fit together and the list of all the things they're doing. You can see from a sort of helicopter position how it all marries together and provides a strong governance kind of framework. Okay, so we note all that, and we note the changes to the terms of reference and so on. Okay, thank you very much, Trish. On the agenda, there's a suggestion we might have a comfort break, but I think we'd probably be okay to just carry on for a bit, and we'll see how we get on. We might be able to rattle through the last items and then have a slightly earlier lunch. Let's see how we go. So item 16, I think is I'm not sure with you, Trish, or who it's with. The Audit Wales Annual Report.
Sorry, Chair, we're going to take it as part of the AAA for Audit Committee, if that's okay. It's attached to the Audit Committee. It's just there for noting because it came through as the Audit Wales Annual Report. So it's just next to the AAA.
Fine. So in that case, we'll take that as such, and we'll move on to 17, which again is still with you, Trish, the interim amendments to standing orders.
Thanks, Chair. So these are just the interim amendments made to the model standing orders that Welsh Government recently made. So it really just reflects the new arrangements with the Joint Commissioning Committee and the change to the trust name following its award of University Trust status as well. And we've also clarified our status as a public body under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act imminently as well. So the Audit Committee reviewed these and endorsed the recommendation to approve them. They're marked up in Annex 1. But the other ask of the board as well is that the standing orders require that we have our AGM by the 31st of July, but given the Audit Wales, so the external audit scheme timing, Welsh Government suggests that we can have it by the end of September. So formal board approval that we can just make that amendment to have our AGM before the 30th of September, which is in the diary.
Okay, very straightforward. I don't think you really wanted to add anything to that?
Or? No, it's had good scrutiny at audit and risk. More than happy to endorse this. To the board.
Fine. So we're just looking for formal approval, then the interim arrangements, also that change in date for AGM. Everybody content to approve those? Yeah. Good. Super. Right. In that case, we're moving on to the last few items, which are the board committee reports, SHPO reports, and so on. We'll just run through those. So I think. Kevin, in 11th Hannah Academic Partnership Committee, anything you wanted to add to the AAA reports?
Just a couple of things. We recognise the challenge in recruiting an academic non-executive director, and appreciate the work that's been done by colleagues. The obviously university status was very welcome after all the work that colleagues had put in the run-up to that significant amount of work over a significant amount of time. The chair has attended, as research champion, attended a workshop in North Wales recently. There was discussion around, well, there was an update on the amount of projects in the trust's research portfolio, which is significant. and we've recommended that the board development might, benefit from an airing of much of that, because it doesn't get cited. We didn't feel in the amount, in the light of the amount of work that's going on. We also talked about the IMTP and the 4 priorities that we identified when we were going to look at university status, recognized that actually those 4 priorities are dealt with by other committees. So the committee will concentrate on the research portfolio and the governance related to it. Academic Partnership Task and Finished Committee has completed its work. And we recognise the closing of that particular group.
Okay, good. Any questions on academic partnership? No. So then moving on to audit committee. Peter?
Not really, Chair, to say that this was a slightly different meeting. It was governance based. We gave those effectiveness reviews a really good airing. The internal audit plan is the internal audit work for the year just finished is almost there, and the final reports will come to our meeting next week. So that will complete, and then we'll have a draft internal audit opinion from the head of internal audit. Right. Aside from that, Chair.
Okay, nothing else. Good. Trish, I don't really comment, but there was a suggestion here that Fleur might join us for this, but
No, she's not. No, she's not.
okay. So then we come to the Quest committee. Kerry, I think you're just going to stand in for Beth. And was there anything in AAA and Quest committee that you wanted to highlight to the main board?
Yeah, I think just a few points. So particularly around the alert section and the risk that we've already talked about extensively today. But, at the time, I think in January, there was 27,000 hours lost, improved slightly in February and March. But, we talked about the impact of that, over 2,000 patients waiting over 12 hours and 1 patient waiting almost 47 hours. And 220 of those patients waiting a long time were elderly, frail. It just shows the impact of, the system challenges that we have. So we've talked today about the 111 and the new system, and the committee congratulated. I think it was Sonia that was there, and all the excellent work that's gone on there, and recognised the challenges, particularly around the training of that. So that was really good. The Putting Things Right plan. I know in Leon's team there's been some challenges around long-term sick, and the committee were assured on the recovery plan around that. The committee asked for escalation updates on our ability to provide a civil contingency response. And then the staff story, Fiona and Julie joined us, and we were talking about support for people after CPR. It was really interesting, prompted a lot of debate. There's some really good work, collaboration and partnership work going on in this space, to the point where I think now there will be cards with a QR code. I work with the Resuscitation Council. So it's slightly different, but really, for me, not only is it the support to people in the community, it demonstrates our collaboration and partnership and innovation in this space. So it's good to hear that. And then with regard to the policy work that's been going on, we approved some more policies, so we were assured on that. And then the other point I just wanted to draw out was around the draft annual quality report. So the committee were really positive about this, and particularly about the approach, because it can be quite dry, but the report was presented with lots of lived experience and examples of impact. So yes, just wanted to finish on that.
Okay.
That's it from me.
Great, thanks. Any questions to Kerry in relation to Quest committee? Anything for Bethan? No. In that case, staying with you, Kerry, standing in for yourself. People and Culture Committee.
Okay, so in terms of People and Culture Committee, so we talked a lot about plan and the progress within the plan. It was my first time of chairing the People and Culture Committee. So there's lots of assurance around the work that Angie's been leading and the different components of that plan. And there was a thread of that coming through. There was good conversation on the operational update. Sonia presented that and some of the people challenges around that. It was a good conversation. And we had Matt join us for the staff story from Pembrokeshire. So Matt's a locality manager. And actually, Matt has progressed, his career has progressed through WAST over a period of time. But he was talking to us about his leadership and the work that he's done around sickness and absence rates and how he's in applying a different culture, finding space to talk to people, to make sure people feel heard. I think it was a really good example of where we've improved the sickness rates and actually where the leadership, supporting people through the leadership, but through Matt's approach has really made a significant impact. And we also talked about how that then could be lifted to other areas. So it was a really positive story. We talked earlier about stress and burnout, the NHS staff survey, but the committee very much focused on that. We approved some policies, and I think, yeah, just on the priorities moving forward, I think just to remind the board that we're going to be continuing to look at the strategic equality objectives, which we've talked about a lot, but I think hoping to see more progress around that next year. And the speaking up safely work that has been very prevalent in the committee. I think it's just for board to be mindful of, we are seeing an increase in people speaking up, and whilst those numbers are increasing, I think it's really important that we recognise that's a good thing. Because we're able to address those challenges and, address some of the cultural issues around that. So that's it from me.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Good, thanks, Kevin. Any questions in relation to that committee? No. Okay, then moving on to Kevin, who's going to put your jogger hat on and talk about Finance and Performance Committee.
Over and above what Chris and Peter and other colleagues in the financial world have discussed this morning, there were some really important areas discussed at the last board, not least the digital plan refresh 24 to 2019, 2024 to 2029, and looking at innovation and design and how to take forward the opportunities that digitization will bring us in the future, and recognize, the committee recognized the challenge, but also recognized the ambition, which was really important as something to get behind. We were assured that the revenue and capital finances for the plan going forward were in place, so that was welcome. Again, I'll just pull out a couple of things. The members were updated on the Trust's information governance toolkit, which had been tested with regard to secure handling of patient data against legal and regulatory requirements. There's good compliance, but there are some areas that need work. There's a plan being promulgated, and that's going to be worked through and reported back to the committee in due course. Chris has talked about the financial position already. The ambulance care program, we looked at some of the issues with regard to that and some of the challenges regard to that. And there's some reports coming back to the committee in the future. As always, we looked at all of the risks that have already been talked through here, and we welcome, when it's ready, the report that will look at how we might restate how we look at and manage risks that are that are organisational as against system. So unless Chris or Peter or anyone else that was there got anything to add to that, I think we've covered most of the financial stuff already, haven't we?
Okay. Looking around, doesn't look like any questions. Excellent, thank you very much indeed. Right, so moving on then, the last couple of items, we've got minutes of board committees which have all been attached and they've been approved by the various committees. That's for information. There's also Joint Wales Committee update reports for also for information. Any other business? I don't have any notifications of any other business items, so that's good. Date of next meetings, we've got 2 meetings coming up. We've got one which is on Teams, which is about accounts, I believe, which is on the 12th of July. And then we've got our standard meeting back here as normal later in July, 25th of July. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. In that case, I just formally asked for the exclusion of press and members of the public because we're going to close this in public meeting. Thank everybody for their attendance. Okay.